Hello. We're hoping that this is the storming entry into a new media empire. Welcome to the 905. If anybody's out there, I'm hoping people can hear us, and we're just checking. So just bear with us while we learn to do this. So Joel, I'm going to throw it over to you and see if I can hear you. And I'm guessing that's a no at the moment. So we'll be working on that, and I'm sure we'll work it out before the evening is done.
You hear me better now.
Ah, there, you're coming in quietly, but you're there.
How about now? Is that
Ah,
better?
that's good. Yeah, yeah. And I don't know what my level sounds like at your end, but hopefully it's okay. Um, so, welcome everybody to the 905ers election night special. Um, and neither of us has ever done anything like this before. We thought we'd give it a go. You get to see all the clutter in my office in its full glory. I actually did tidy up earlier. And for those of you who missed this live broadcast, you're going to get it tomorrow when we put it out as the podcast episode. So look forward to that. And I mean, it promises to be an interesting evening, to say the least. Joel, I guess we were going to start off just talking about our impressions of what this whole campaign period has been like, and the it's been an interesting election, I guess. I guess they're all interesting. We were discussing today whether this is an all-time low or not the all-time low in terms of what elections feel like. And what's your impression been?
It's been a very depressing election. I'll be honest. A bit of a letdown. I thought that this was going to be far more um, robust than what we got. I was a little disappointed in just the lack of kind of meat to this debate and whatnot that we got. It was just I thought it was just a letdown all around.
Yeah, I mean, it's really been. I mean, and I think I said to you earlier that I felt like the last election in 2019 was worse in that it was just everything about that election seemed truly, truly awful with the whole, obviously, the blackface scandal. And I really felt a leader of the Conservative. I mean, not that anybody covered themselves with glory, that's for sure, but the previous Conservative leader, Andrew Scheer, really plumbing the depths. I don't know. Do you feel? I mean, it's been different. It's just I'm not sure that this election's ever really got out of the starting gate in terms of provoking
No,
any great interest.
it did. Well, let's face it. This was the election nobody wanted. Nobody except for I would argue Justin Trudeau wanted this election. Nobody was eager to have it. You and I had talked about it before on the podcast that we were saying, well, who's going to be pulling the trigger on this? And it was it was just a complete letdown. I thought that Parliament was working. It was something that I pushed back a bit on Adam Van Couverden when we had him on the podcast. It was just why are we into this? From the layman's perspective, Parliament was working. Like CERB and CRB and wage subsidies were getting out the door to the parties that needed it. The vaccine rollout was a complete success. We last check today it's 79%. I think of Canadians have 2 doses of the vaccine. So I mean that's a success clearly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't know what the urgency was. Where this this rush was, because if you remember back in the springtime, there was the opposition parties were putting their feet in the water, saying, "Oh, can we trigger an election?" And it was clear then nobody wanted an election. Nobody was eager to push for one, and so we ended up with kind of chicken. There was a game of chicken, political chicken, if you will. I was surprised that Justin Trudeau called it. I was flabbergasted to say, why would you do this to yourself? You have nobody's going to pull it. Like, you have pretty much a majority mandate. The conservatives and the NDP are going to huff and puff their chests and whatnot. But in the end of the day, you had the ability to put forward your agenda. You just didn't.
Yeah. I mean, does anybody ever look forward to elections? Do you think there's an election that anybody? To an extent, I sometimes push back a little bit against this. Oh, it's so dreadful they're making us. It's like, dude, you got to walk to the church hall and put an X in the box.
Well,
Not,
here's but you and I talked about it. We said, why, give us a chance to breathe. Like, we had gotten through a global pandemic. For many of us, we were stuck. Like, you and I were stuck indoors most of the time, stuck in our homes. Very few options to go out and socialize. Instead, we got we finally got the vaccine in our arm, and things were finally starting to open up, and we got this the sense of, oh, we can finally start to breathe. And then they said, no, we're going to do it. Instead of enjoying it, allowing us to enjoy ourselves, we got we're told, no, we're going to an election.
I mean, I guess I get the temptation that was there for Trudeau, and that the polls were saying, "Hey, you get a majority here," and that's. I mean, that's really the bottom line. That they all go when they think they have the best chance of actually of winning it. So to an extent, all the stuff about this is I think Evan O'Toole yesterday called it un-Canadian to call an election. I think, well, really, if you were in the same position, are you saying you wouldn't do it? No, of course not.
No, it's you could call an election. I mean, let's face it, the reason why we got an election was Justin Trudeau, I think, wanted a majority. The polls were in his favor. He was riding high in the polls. The approval ratings for Trudeau and the Liberals were through the roof. So, I mean, yeah, part of you says, yeah, of course you're going to call it. Why wouldn't you? But at the opposite end of the spectrum is the fact that you called it and people didn't want it. Like, he run the risk of doing the whole David Peterson thing, where he calls an election and nobody wants it, and he gets punished for it.
Yeah, it's and it's certainly. I mean, I certainly do feel that the Liberals have been punished a bit. Maybe we'll get on to in a bit what our kind of predictions for this evening are. I don't know if there've been any exit polls or anything like that done yet, but the most likely result, if we're going by the polls and the pundits and everything, is that we'll be back somewhere around where we were before we started. In which case, I read somewhere today that an election is a sort of $600 million proposition to run. Oh boy, what a waste of time. Now, I still think there could be some surprises this evening, that's for sure.
We're looking at some of the results coming in right now. We're looking at, it's all on the East Coast, obviously, but right now I'm not seeing any surprises. The Liberals are leading in seats. They have, according to the CBC, they have 2 elected already, but right now it's appearing that the Liberals are going to hold on to Atlantic Canada. Which, again, not a big surprise there. You and I thought that it's what's going to, that's what's going to happen. But it's just that's, I'm not seeing a huge number of surprises here. uh, that I think we're not going to see a lot of change. The attitude that they kind of got in the polls were people just didn't want this. I think at the start there was a thought, oh, there might actually be a change of power, that Aaron O'Toole might come in and actually win this thing. Um, but he peaked too early. I think people are just saying no. We were comfortable with the way things were. Make it work, which is going to be kind of a slap in the face to Trudeau and the Liberals, in my opinion.
Yeah, it certainly don't come out of it smelling of roses. I think that, uh, yeah, I mean, geez, it, I mean, but then you have to look at that. You know, they went for it. I have a feeling that this may end up being. I mean, it's going to be a bad night unless predictions are very wrong. It's going to be a bad night for the Conservatives in that they should be doing better. They should be taking seats away from the Liberals, and I'm not sure they're going to take any. It's possible, I think, that they could lose a few because of what's happening with the PPC polling in some pretty significant numbers in some places. You know, I don't think the PPC will get a seat unless I'm very mistaken. But it's it's definitely they're getting enough of a vote to have an impact on the Conservatives. That's for sure. And I know you were saying we've both driven around sort of rural Ontario in the last few days, and you'd think the PPC were a much bigger party than they are, judging by the lawn signs that are out there.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the biggest takeaway from this from this thing is the rise of the PPC. This election has kind of turned into a battle on the right, with them taking away support from the Conservatives and forming, and it's just. I think what it's shown is that the political landscape is very shallow when it comes to the right in this country. There's a belief that they want it, that it's so robust, and that people that there's this deep pool of conservatism to pull from. And I'm gonna say I don't think it's as deep as people want to say. There's a sense of anger. I think that there's a sense of anger in the country, and that they kind of tapped into that. But in terms of being like legitimately forming an alternative to the Liberals, that takes time. There's I think the luster of Justin Trudeau has fallen away from people over time. And the Conservatives have mistaken that as there's this visceral hatred of him and the Liberals right now in the country, which is not the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the whole. Again, lawn signs don't tell you much. They don't tell you who's going to win an election. I'm always trying to persuade myself. And just if we do have any viewers right now, we're having a bit of a problem with Facebook here, so just bear with us while we try and sort that one out, because we need to be we could do with sharing a just trying to work out the how to get our video, which is running, onto the event page. But anyway, so I'm definitely multitasking here. But I'm gonna have to throw it back to you, Joel, because I just lost my thread there trying to think about.
Well, like what you and I were talking a bit offline about this was that the Conservatives. This is the election that nobody, like, where none of the parties listen to the people of the country. The Liberals just started off by saying they didn't hear the public say, "We don't want an election. Keep doing your job. We like what you're doing so far. We like the makeup of Parliament. Make it work. That's what we want." Then you had the Conservatives who all they did was listen to themselves, and they literally all they listened to was the echo chamber of people saying, "Oh, gun control, gun control, gun control," which turned in. I mean, that turned into their Achilles heel. They thought that was going to that people were angry about it. Clearly, the Liberals clued in. Okay, we can make this. We can turn this into a how should I put it, into an election issue, and it turned into one because I don't think the majority of Canadians care about gun control. They don't care about guns. They're not big fans of them, but they're not. It's not the motivating issue that it is. Instead, and then you had the NDP who were just thought, oh well, progressives are upset with Trudeau because the lack of promises, and they are, but they're also just not blindly going to say, okay, well, we've got to give it to the NDP. And the NDP showed very lacking in terms of details and an actual plan of what they're going to do to address the issues.
We spoke to Enrico. No, sorry, I got that wrong.
Roberto Enriquez.
Roberto Enriquez, yeah, it was great. I mean, I thought it was a solid candidate, and was kind enough to come onto the podcast, and articulate guy. Clearly has potential. If he wishes to continue pursuing politics. But it was interesting just looking at the three-party platforms in a fair amount of detail. That really the NDP platform is kind of the thinnest of the lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is thin. It's a very there's a lot of gaps in the details, and and as they say in they don't say in politics, but they should. The devil's in the details. That they just there's their chance to shine, and they didn't come through, and that's the sad part of what we're seeing right now. It's just been a very lackluster election. You and I talked. If you're going to call an election, give us a reason to call an election. To me, the only reason to make it work would have been Justin Trudeau came in and said, "I've got a major plan to get us back, to get the economy coming back and whatnot." They didn't. The fact that they didn't release their platform for a couple weeks into the campaign was just. I said, well, how do you go into this election and you don't have a big bold vision ready to go?
Well, that was certainly what we thought might happen, wasn't it? That I think if we were talking about what might come out of this election, and if say Trudeau is going to go for it, maybe he's going to make a really big splash with something like basic income, something like that, and nothing. I mean, not nothing. There's significant stuff in the Liberal platform. But it's incremental, and it's very difficult to get people excited about incremental things. I think when people are kind of not really wanting to go into an election anyway, and then you say, well, hey, we're offering you, we want a majority because it's really important we get a majority, and here's the thing, we'll be like we were before, and some of those things that we haven't finished yet, we'll make more progress with those. And in a way, that's one of the most honest things any government can tell you about the government is like, yeah, it's not going to be a revolution, we're going to make incremental change, because that's pretty much how government operates. However, there was a time when governments came out with really kind of big ideas, and I feel that the Liberals have really kind of lost the plot on the ideas thing. They came in with so much optimism in 2015, and I'm not going to sit here and say they haven't done some good things. We have a carbon tax now that is a national carbon tax. They've certainly spent. I think one thing that most people have spoken to, a lot of people were willing to give them credit for, is that what they needed to do with COVID-19 they did, and which was basically write some really big checks, and and ensure that when the vaccines came out, that we had a supply, and they did both of those. I mean, the only thing you can really say about the vaccine supply was the countries who got it sooner were the countries that had factories, you know.
Yeah, but I mean that to me was a bigger story than it should have been. It was the fact that we had we were told by the opposition parties, Trudeau had completely bungled the acquisition of vaccines. We were going to be, I mean, Michelle Rempel of the Conservatives was tweeting how we were going to be 2035 before we were able to be, all of us were going to be fully vaxxed. And here we are, we're not even at the end of September, and just shy of 80% are double vaccinated. And to me, I thought like that, that's some incredible egg on your face to make that bold of a statement. And you had every critic of Trudeau coming in saying, "Oh, the vaccines are not going to work, and or we're not going to get them and whatnot." And to give Trudeau credit, he stuck to his guns and he got the doses. Where the screw up was at the provincial level, but that maybe they mistook that as the opportunity to come in and say, all right, let's go call an election. Which again, sometimes your hubris gets the best of you and you call an election. I think looking at the track of this election again, at the very start, it's very clear Aaron O'Toole had a lot of momentum. He wasn't the big scary boogeyman, but at the end of the day, Aaron O'Toole lost this. Seeing as how the results are going to come in, lost it because of he didn't listen to the people again. If he listened to what people want, he would have got it. Also, I know what we should talk about. Let's talk about the Conservative Party right now, because you and I have shared a number of stories offline about how we've been frustrated with the CPC in this election. I'm gonna throw it over to you because I've been talking too long.
That's okay. Well, I'm very much trying to multitask here, because I'm still having a bit of a fight with Facebook, but we'll get there. Yeah, I mean the Conservatives. So it seems to me. I mean, so let's talk about the article we posted yesterday, which was, and because I have a background in Burlington, as a lot of people know, and I really didn't want to talk about Burlington too much because I thought it definitely opened me up. I could be accused of being, not so much. I hope I've established by now that I'm willing to criticize any party, because I definitely have. But the current incumbent in Burlington is someone that I've known for a long time. And I can't pretend that's not the case. So I was in some ways reluctant to speak about anything to do with Burlington or any of the candidates here. However, it changed my mind when we saw the Spectator came out with an election special on Thursday. That just these kind of questionnaires go around at election time. So they got absolutely every candidate to respond, I think, and maybe there's one or two candidates in the whole of the kind of Hamilton, Niagara, Burlington region who didn't answer. There was only really one question, which is, if elected, I promise to. And then there was one supplementary question to that, which was, are you vaccinated? So, it may be 150 words at most that they had. Not much they can do. The vast majority of candidates answered that question in one of three ways. Yes, I've had the vaccine. No, I haven't had the vaccine. Or I'm not answering that because I don't think it's a fair question. Any of those replies are legitimate. We may disagree with them. I think most people certainly do disagree with 2 out of the 3 of those questions. But they are legitimate answers, and you can't really have a go at someone for for saying that. The answer that I don't think is acceptable at all is to not answer, is to pretend the question doesn't exist. Just skip it. Don't say yes, no, or I'm not answering. Just pretend it's not there and hope nobody notices. Because in this current election, I can't think of any good reason why someone wouldn't say one of those three answers. Yes, I'm vaccinated. No, I'm not vaccinated. Or I don't want to answer. Unless you're trying to get away with not being vaccinated and not having to defend yourself for not having been vaccinated. We don't know. We can only guess because the Conservative candidate in Burlington, Emily Brown, has basically hardly spoken to anybody. She did one of the three debates, which is very traditional in Burlington, that the Conservatives do the Chamber of Commerce debate because, business. But nothing else matters. Highly respected organisations who run the Halton Environmental Network and I'm gonna blank on the name, but the again a kind of Halton Women's. So it's a group of it's a group of groups in essence that promote things to do with the advancement of women generally. It's been around for a very long time. Both of these organizations are completely non-partisan. So it really, again, it's not like they're skipping it because one of the debates being held by the Communist Party of Canada or something. It's
right.
These are independent groups. So you've got very few ways in an election, a decreasing number of ways in an election, which you can actually speak to anybody very much. You can go and knock on a door, and that's a powerful tool that's still in your armory. But, with 180,000 people in Burlington, you ain't going to get to every door. Or you can speak to the media and you can go to debates. Those are the kind of three options that are at your disposal. The Conservatives just have cut two of those right out of the equation. They're not interested in speaking to the vast majority of people. And I find that mind-boggling, that it's nothing to do with their politics. It's the fact that they've basically decided that about 75%, certainly 70% of the population in any city is not even worth giving the time of day because they're kind of the enemy, right? And that's what I feel we've been seeing in this election is like one party reaching out to only the people who are already in their corner, which really, when you then throw the PPC into the mix, gives them, it's kind of a law of diminishing returns, it seems to me.
Well, that's it. That's the thing, is that and it was almost like the CPC and the PPC. I need to use full name. The Conservative Party and the People's Party were going after the same group of people, and the Conservatives were just terrified of kind of letting this, letting them kind of do their own thing. We had, when the writ was dropped, we had reached out to Melissa Lantsman of the Conservative Party in Thornhill to come on the podcast, and we were told she was excited to come on and share and be part of it and all that. But then we went to confirm. We were told no, she can't come on. We're not allowing her to come on podcast. Now, what we thought was interesting is that she did go on. She did end up going on the Brian Crombie show, but I mean, Brian is on Mississauga 960, I think, so he's on a radio program, so technically it's not a podcast, but he does put his recordings onto a podcast format and onto YouTube and shares and promotes it. So I was a little surprised that, I don't know if it was a matter of not allowing podcasts or if it was something a little bit more maybe personal, that, we are a progressive, we're a progressive mindset, but we were, I thought we would have given her a fair shot. And I thought it's something about when a political party says, no, you can't talk to certain people. It does a disservice to I think it does a disservice to our democracy. And quite frankly, if your argument can't hold up to two progressive-minded guys asking some questions, then you got something. There's something fundamentally wrong with your organization. If you're like, you can't run a country based in fear. You can't be afraid of people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I really think, I really think that the least we can expect for people who throw their hats into the ring is that they're accessible. And I mean, everybody gets politics is kind of about having to answer questions quite often that you don't want to answer. I mean, that's why we always say, well, politicians don't answer the question. Well, they don't answer because they really don't want to.
Right.
Because it will be some inconsistency or some, and I've talked, I think, before about how it's really it's a catch-22 in modern politics, I think, and I almost have some pity for the people who are involved in the process, because it's very easy to stand on the outside and say they don't answer the questions, they never do what they promise to do, all these things, when the constraints of the actual job are just kind of brutal, or they're almost designed to make you into the thing that we dislike about modern politics, I think. However, you can at least try to fight back against that a little bit. You look at the Conservatives, and it's like, dudes, I'm not just having a go at the Conservatives. This has nothing to do with policy. This is to do with how you're behaving within the context of a democracy. I just they gotta deal with this, and we got to expect better from all of them. Every single last one of the parties, they need to start seriously thinking about how, if we keep on doing this, particularly if we keep on doing it every 2 years, keep on going through this thing of people going through an election and just coming out the other end really feeling kind of depressed. Even if your guys win or lose the least, which is probably the more accurate way of describing it. It's not good, is it?
No, it's not. I don't know how to phrase it best. I think it's just a real. It does a disservice to this whole discourse. Again, it comes back to the idea of you got to go and talk to people outside of your party. Let's face it, the Conservative Party has been looking inward for the last. I'm going to say, honestly, since Stephen Harper was their leader, they are afraid of the idea. It comes down to this us versus them mentality all the time, which, it filters down to the other parties, right? Because that's what it gets into. Liberals are as guilty of it as the NDP and as the Conservatives. This us and them mentality it doesn't do any of us any good. It's just such a turnoff when it comes down to our democracy.
Yeah. So I mean, let's change direction a little bit and talk about, having bashed the Conservatives, let's bash the other guys some more.
Yeah.
And we talked about how calling this election now was, again, it's that I'm cursed by seeing both sides of these questions, I guess, but nobody wanted it. That's certainly true, and I think ultimately, if we end up back where we were before we started, that is kind of a little bit shameful. It's all very well saying, well, my experience of polls in Canada has always been that they're kind of not worth anything until the writ is dropped.
No.
So what if it says that? Remember, Justin Trudeau should know this, because the polls at the election he won and became prime minister for the first time was he was in third place, and in a strong third place at the outset of that election, if I remember rightly. Which just goes to show, and it was like a very long election. period that Stephen Harper thought would sort of spend the Liberals into the ground, and I guess the fact that Justin Trudeau offered something apparently very different from the other two leaders at the time, the other two main leaders at the time. No disrespect to the Greens. Made all the difference, and we certainly saw that here. That basically, the moment that Ritt dropped, all the polls that have been going on for the last 6 months were done. You know.
Well, that's the. Yeah, I mean that 6 years ago is a long time. Let's be honest. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that I think as I said before, the luster on Justin Trudeau has long since vanished. You and I have been critical of his handling of the First Nations relations file, which I think it's a difficult file because we're talking about again institutional systemic ingrained racism that has been that we're asking you to fix it. You can't do it in one term, granted. However, there's a lot of benchmarks that seem to be dropped that are just, we're still asking, what about the boil water advisories on reserves? And the results always like, well, we're working on it. Like, well, you've had 6 years. You said this was a priority. You have 6 years to do it. Where are the results? Now they are getting it done, yes, but to say that it takes time, it's not. It's a pretty bad. I think it's a pretty bad excuse. The other issue is, let's talk about electoral reform.
You never need to ask me twice.
Well, but we one of the first things we talked about in this podcast, that's a plug to all of our listeners or people who are viewing right now. Go back and check, I think like episode 5 or whatever. One of the earliest episodes we did with it was Dave Meslin about how do we get electoral reform and doing ranked ballots at the municipal level. The idea that it would, if it proved successful there, would trickle up into the federal level. We're still doing this first past the post, and there's something that in our preparation for today's this live cast, I went and looked at the win percentages in the 905 region of all the candidates who won. How much did they win by? There's only like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 candidates out of 40. 11 out of 40 had over 50% of a victory margin. The system is flawed. Like we were looking at the numbers today. We're thinking there's a chance for a number of ridings to be flipped from the Conservatives to the Liberals, not necessarily because of the Liberals have done so well, but because of the People's Party are going to really nip at that Conservative vote, allowing the Liberals to sneak a few victories here and there, which is what I'm looking forward to when those results come in. We deserve better. Like we should have a more definitive result of who our electors are. Hey, Justin, we have our first comment today.
Hey, Justin. All right, I know Justin. Should we say surnames and things? Well, we'll just say Justin. But I know who you are, Justin.
Welcome. Nobody in the 905, and I would suspect even if you take that across the country, can easily say, yes, I have a clear mandate from the people I represent. I have their full support. Trudeau dropped that ball. And to put focus like here in the 905, Karina Gould, who is our MP, Burlington's MP, we do know her personally. She kind of took over that file when it was bungled, and nothing happened with it. It just sat. And
she was given the job because it had already been decided that electoral reform was dead in the water. So I can't remember who the minister was before she had that ministry, but the change of of minister was basically all about the prime minister having decided. Yeah, I'm going to say this because I think it's true. The prime minister had decided that the outcome of any consultation on electoral reform was not going to be the type of electoral reform that he wanted, which seems pretty clearly to be a ranked, I believe, a ranked ballot method, which you know, I think I tweeted somewhere, well, on Twitter, obviously, the other day that there are a multitude of different systems for holding elections, and all of them are better than first past the post. First past the post is a calamity. The only places that still use it are Canada and the UK, and the USA is also a first past the post system.
Well, but here's the thing. Who's going to my bet is who's going to start being a champion of electoral reform after tonight is going to be the Conservative Party of Canada.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But then there was the whole reform era, They didn't do it then.
But their solution then wasn't to push for electoral reform. It was to push for a merger. That was their solution. Their solution to win wasn't to let's reform the system and allow us a path to victory. It was, no, we're going to merge with our cousin, brother offshoot or whatever and become a new party. And that seemed to work for them for a while. But here's the problem is that they've split again. And I think this PPC, you're going to see possibly a repeat of 1993.
Yeah, it's interesting that, again, just going through the sort of regional candidates in our neck of the woods, how many of those PPC candidates have ran for the Reform Party in their histories? So I guess that means that although many people, I believe, felt that the Reform Conservative merger was kind of a Reform takeover in a lot of ways, certainly the membership of the old PC party, federal PC party, expanded hugely with Reform members joining up to vote in the merger vote. And but it seems that once the merger went ahead, the people who had been Reform candidates and not old PC candidates kind of went away.
Well, here I want to kind of bring it back to the Liberals at the moment, kind of their fallacy. We have Kyle saying electoral reform, PR, or proportional representation or ranked ballot. On my vote, ranked ballot, easily. We had Dave Meslin on, and we talked with Jesse Helmer, who was a municipal councillor in London, because I believe London, Ontario is the only jurisdiction in Canada that elects their representatives based on ranked ballots, and it worked. And it's very clear that they didn't have any issues. There's no hiccups. I think they got their results in. It took a little bit longer, but it worked out. It can work, and it should work. That's how I think we should be electing our members of parliament and members of provincial parliament, as it were.
I think well, two things I'll say on this one, and good question, Kyle. Thanks for asking it. I think ranked ballots is great for municipalities because it's actually the only system you can use in municipalities because there are no parties. So you can't divide things up proportionally according to a parties when there's no parties in the system. And yeah, it was cancelled by Ford, by Premier Ford, who very much on a whim, for no real reason other than, well, I guess the feeling that it might favour non-conservatives, and I think that's a real tragedy because if you look at some of the things that London has done since they had ranked ballot election, it puts some of the behaviour we see in other councils in Ontario to shame. They recently had a vote on whether to spend, I can't remember the number, but some huge number of dollars on widening a road, or not spending that money and putting it into transit and bike lanes and things like that. And they voted to do that. So I don't think it wasn't unanimous or anything like that. There was obviously discussion, but on a few things, London, which is a council that had a lot of problems about a decade ago, with a mayor, I believe, who had to resign. Now really sort of showing the way. It had its first black councillor, I believe, and people were on the council who would not have been on council under the old system, and made improvements as a result. And I can't. Well, no, I won't say that because I'm not sure if it's true or not. But anyway, there are other elements to this. Now that's gone away now, and it'll be interesting to see what London's like under the next council. But getting back to the electoral system we use for
I
federally
just
and
want
provincially.
I want to weigh in for a second here on why I think ranked ballots, we need them at the federal level and even at the provincial level as well. This election, I thought, and you and I have commented offline, we're going just to a very messy, bad place in our politics. The fact that we saw in this election, the rise of the People's Party, who, let's be honest, are they're very much a racist, xenophobic, anti science, anti vax, anti mask, all that stuff. And they're an anti party. If there's something that you might be in favor for, chances are they're against it in the cloak of personal freedom, whatever that means. The behavior of some of the candidates. I mean, we saw it of the candidates, campaign managers throwing rocks at Justin Trudeau I believe, in London during the campaign on a campaign stop. That's just behavior that's just reprehensible, and it should be stuff that, right, quite frankly, just drops you out of, just drops you out of contention. Just makes you look and say, hey, I'm not cool with that. I think a ranked ballot would help do that, because by nature, you're trying to go for everybody's vote, but you also have to say, well, I need to be a second or a third place vote on that ballot. If I know I don't have enough support here in the riding flat out, I don't have 50% plus one support, I'm going to need to be a second or a third choice for somebody. You don't do that if you're the guy who says, hey, I think we should go throw rocks at our opponents. I think we should just put up signs up wherever we want on public space because my personal freedom trumps yours. I think I want to go and hang out with the people who spit and shout names at doctors and patients as they enter hospitals and block ambulances from going to ERs and whatnot. I'm not saying ranked ballot is going to be the panacea, solve it all issue, but a ranked ballot, by its nature, your candidate has to distance itself from it and take the fuel out of that fire. They have to become more moderate. Now they can hold on to their principles. There's plenty of room to do that, but the behavior of, hey, I want to cause trouble. I want to say that outrageous thing to get that 30-second soundbite. I want that Twitter comment that's going to go viral so I can cloak myself in freedom and the flag and all that nonsense. Ranked ballots reins that in, because somebody says, well, I might consider my second choice, but I have 3 or 4 other choices I could also pick.
So I think ranked ballots would be an improvement. I'm not going to say that. Well, ultimately, I think the way that this will be solved and should be solved is the way that it was done in Ireland, which is to take the whole thing out of the hands of the politicians and out of the hands of people like me and you. It's a question of handing over to something like a one of the People's Commissions, or whatever they were called in Ireland, which they used as a way to address sticky problems that politicians can't deal with because they have all kinds of vested interests. Nothing is more of a vested interest than the way that the elections are settled. Now, under that, basically, you would, under the Irish system, is you pick people at random. And you think, well, why should these random people make a choice? Well, for exactly the same reason that random people are used to send people to prison or not, because they have no vested interest one way or the other. They are, by nature, independent. They're not going to get anything out of their decision. And they're not part of that kind of party political process where they're thinking about, is this going to benefit my future career? Rank ballots are a good system. I believe they're used in, rank ballot is, I think, the system in Australia. Justin, you can, if you're still there, you can confirm or deny whether it's rank ballots in Australia. The other one is various forms of mixed member, what's called mixed member proportional, which also I voted in a mixed member proportional election. That was a system that was introduced in Scotland in 1999 when they basically got an equivalent of kind of a provincial parliament back. And it seems to work well there. I mean, no one's knocking at the door for a different system. Under that kind of system, what you don't get very often is majority government of any sort. So in Scotland, I think there's been one majority since 1999. But because of that, the parties don't look for a majority. They look for the biggest minority they can get, and then who can they cooperate to kind of get them over the hump to the 50% of the vote, in essence. So I think I mentioned on the podcast last week with Adam Van Koeverden that in their recent election, the government party, which is the SNP, fell one seat short of a majority, so they worked something out with the Greens, which is just something that doesn't happen here. You know, it's like, oh no, we got 35% of the vote, and a strong minority will just try and run it from that anyway, which, you know, is you're being, the vast majority of people in that case voted against the government. What kind of system is that? So I really think it would fundamentally change, and I think it does fundamentally change the way politics works in a better way, and it gives the smaller parties a level of voice that they deserve and enables them to make progress. But it also, under all these systems, it encourages people to move towards a more cooperative approach. Certainly the rank ballot ones at a local level, it keeps that link between the riding and Parliament. The mixed member systems can be a bit more complicated, although you can still have there's still a geographic component. You still vote for an MP in your riding, but there's also other sort of elements to it.
Okay. I'm looking at some of the results that are coming in right now still on the East Coast, because in about half an hour we're hopefully going to get into the central Quebec. You know, we're going to get Quebec ridings coming in. I think we're going to start seeing changes there. But I'll be honest. So everything right now, all the results are coming in. It looks like everything is pretty much going according to plan. I'm not seeing any huge upsets or concerns here right now. It looks like Conservatives are going to hold on to a small handful of seats, but the Liberals are fortress in Atlantic Canada for the Liberals is holding still, which was a surprise because, I mean, of course, at the start of this election, everybody was talking about how, oh my gosh, the Liberals in Atlantic Canada are threatened, but I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, it looks like the same, and I noticed in the chat, and you'll be able to, we'll be able to get on to checking this ourselves directly. The PPC taking 4 to 5%, as high as 10% in some places. That really sticks the boot into the Conservatives, to be honest, isn't it?
I think it's enough to throw a wrench to their plans. Because right now I'm getting my results here from CBC, and I got CBC and Global up right now. But right now the Liberals have 42.5 of the vote share. Conservatives are at 33. Block at 0.1, but it's just one riding. New Democrat 17%. The Green is only 2.4. That I find is interesting because if you remember, like the Greens made a big breakthrough in Atlantic Canada with Jenica Atwin. Now she ran for the Liberals. Looks like she's probably going to hold on to her seat, I believe. But and the People's Party, has 4.3% of the vote share. That it's a small thing, but it's enough, I think, to really throw a wrench in Aaron O'Toole's path to victory, especially if that holds, I think, across the country, and especially once you get it, and again, especially once you get into the 905 area. I mean, this is the reason why we kind of created the podcast. We always say is because this is it. Like the 905 is the region that's really up for play, and that you can see ridings shift around. If that holds true, I'm expecting to see possibly some conservative seats in the 905 switch over to the Liberal, only because of that People's Party vote just nipping away at their core base.
I mean, the Conservatives have picked up 5 seats by the look of it, and the Greens have lost their seat. New Democrats have lost a seat, which is surprising, right? That they would lose one. So I mean, it's definitely a swing towards the Conservatives out there, but whether it's enough to signify a really bad night, I'm not sure.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't. I mean, I don't think it'll be a bad night for the Conservatives, but let's be honest. If they don't pull off a win, I think Aaron O'Toole's chances of a job start to dwindle.
Yeah, you wonder. Well, the Conservatives don't traditionally have as much patience with the leaders as the NDP do. And maybe there's good reason for that. I'm not sure, but I don't know. I mean, it seems like whoever they pick at the moment, it's the same old story that every election. I mean, I have to say, I think the Liberals are very good at doing this. Basically, getting everybody to talk about the Conservatives' weaknesses rather than anything else. So the Conservatives kind of like to try and point at Justin Trudeau and say, he's a lightweight and a flake, and the Liberals point right back and say they're frothing at the mouth and they're crazy, and it's like, who do you believe? Is kind of what every recent election has been about, and for better or worse, the Liberals pointing at the Tories and say be scared has worked much better. But yeah, I mean, if they get rid of O'Toole, so what? They replace him with another person who's going to not be in control of his own party.
Well, that's the that I think is the Achilles heel. If I don't know what the future would be for the Conservative Party after this election. You try and fight the People's Party to win them over, or you do what you did with the Alliance and pull them into your party. I don't think that's a smart solution. Or and this is the big if, you have a come to Jesus moment, no pun intended, maybe, but you look at the other end of the spectrum, you realize there's a lot more votes on that end. There's a lot more people out there that you can go campaign for. You can go and get those votes for it, because I don't think that there's a huge amount of support for the Liberals right now in this country. It's just people don't want to just vote for somebody who's just angry. Being angry is not enough to get elected in this country.
And I'm just going to share with everybody a comment that Joel just sent me in the private chat, which is like, "Shut up about ranked ballots." And fair comment. However, I mean, this. My final point on that will be that we've got a party that's trying to win based on going after 32 to 35% of the vote. And that can't be right. You can't just keep on going on like that. They have to you have to be going after 40, 45, 50% of the vote minimum. So the Liberals and the NDP kind of in many ways fight over the same territory, and the Conservatives are just fighting over their own fiefdom, and not really trying to expand beyond that. I think we're going to talk about this a lot more next year with the provincial election, about the decision. Well, I mean, I don't think it's any great mystery, but I believe the provincial Liberals kind of decided to move rightwards after the last election, in their selection of a new leader, and whether that was a smart move when again you're trying to take votes from a party that really doesn't move, that has its people locked up. They are just conservatives and they ain't going anywhere other than further right.
Well, that's the thing with this country is that conservatives. I don't want to say conservative. I want to say right leaning people want to think that we are America light. That what works in America, with the issues that are affecting America, they can translate here to Canada, and I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case at all. The majority of people here are very progressive. I mean, let's look at the pandemic. How many people were approving of CERB and wage subsidies and whatnot? They wanted money into the pockets of people. The people were talking about UBI as a big social program that they thought they'd be okay with this. But then you had Pierre Poilievre and Michelle Rempel going on saying, "Oh, but the debt." And I said, I don't think the debt's as big of an issue for everyday Canadians as the Conservatives want to think it is. I think because people realize, like, well, we went into massive debt, and nobody's come knocking on the door saying, "Hey, we're taking your country away from you until you pay off your debt." Like that's not how the government debt works.
Well, it makes me laugh. Someone shared a picture with me of a sign somewhere in Burlington. That's a quote from Justin Trudeau, and they're also taking a dig at Justin Trudeau for not knowing anything about finance. So it's something about, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, basically, Justin Trudeau knows nothing about money. Meanwhile, the Conservatives for the last decades have kind of made this thing about fiscal. Well, they say they're fiscally responsible, but they turn that into, we can't have debt. We have to get rid of the debt. Well, every country in the world has debt, and Canada is right, bang slap in the middle in terms of how much debt we're in, and in an era of incredibly low interest rates, that's been the economically smart thing to do for a long time. Now, if interest rates start going up, you've got a problem. But government bonds don't have variable interest rates. Governments borrow at the lowest rates of anybody on the face of the earth. So that there's all kinds of reasons why deficit and debt can be the smart thing to do. I'm not defending any particular party or any particular government's level of spending. You can argue all day about how much is the right level, but this kind of simplistic, oh my God, they're spending, they're mortgaging our future, they should behave like a family does with its pocketbook, is just such a load of nonsense. It really is.
Well, here's a question. I like playing hypotheticals. They're fun. What do you think about the issues that were talked about in this election so far, or not so far in the election?
What issues did we talk about? I mean, like
we talked about
PPC throwing rocks.
Okay, we talked at the start. We talked about social housing. That was the first topic that got attention in the national discourse, was how everybody wanted to talk about every party's plan for social housing. We had Mike Moffat on to discuss the party's, not the party, but the housing crisis in Canada, which I thought was good. I like hearing that.
In some ways, I mean,
it was a good start.
It was a real issue that was being spoken about on the campaign trail. But
And
then we
then
went
we
from there to
gun control,
yeah.
because
But
here the problem was all the parties kind of had a decent policy. Like the conservative policy on the social issue wasn't, or sorry, social housing issue. Um, what it wasn't bad. It wasn't like oh my god, you guys don't get it. It was, I mean, it was conservative leaning, but I thought, okay, they seem to get it. They seem to have an idea of the problem, and they have an idea of how they have a right market centric idea of that's how we're gonna solve it. I thought, okay, it's not bad. Um,
there
kudos.
there were ideas in there that I thought were well worth discussing that nobody has talked about in this election. The
Right.
Conservatives can't talk about it because they don't talk to anybody.
No. Well, we offered Melissa Lansman
Yeah,
again to come
I
on,
would have
and she
loved to
said
seriously look at those things in that platform and talk about them because they're
yes.
different. Maybe they're good, maybe they're bad, maybe they're bad. I mean, they tend to be about taking obviously more of a market approach, but it wasn't. They were worth discussing. But no one's talked about those all election long because they
No,
won't talk to
because
us. And the Liberals, well, it's in their interest to knock the Conservatives off their game,
and they
which
did
is
big time with
let's
gun
talk
control.
about guns, let's talk about abortion, let's talk, and it works. So you can't expect them to stop doing it when it works.
Well, that's why, like, if if the conservatives want to start, I think, really shaking the liberals off their game, and I think Aaron O'Toole tried to do that with his claim for climate change, to say it's it's an issue, we need to address it. I think that's, if they had that in the policy, that takes a big blast of wind out of the liberal sails there. Um, but they didn't, and that, like, the conservatives just fell into the trap, right? It's, no, don't take my guns. Well, here's the thing: majority of Canadians don't care about your guns. They don't care. They don't like guns. They don't. They view it as a car, right? It's a tool. If that's your hobby, fine, go ahead. But you don't have a right to it. I'm not comfortable with it. You're going to use it, like, we'll regulate it like we would your automobile. And and the problem is, the people that are defending gun control, or defending guns, or want to loosen up gun control, are the kind of people that you're like, I don't trust you with guns. Like, I wouldn't trust you with a gun. And that's a very bad PR image to have. And the conservatives kind of dug into that. They just doubled down on it. And then the second issue that they had was also the fact that he started flip flopping. Like, I think they realized at the last minute, oh my god, Canadians are not on board with this. We thought that they were, but they're not. And they try to flip flop at the last minute, and that's the last thing you can do in an election, is to contradict your own platform after you release it.
So I mean, to throw another hypothetical out there. So
Mm-hmm.
in the early days of the election, it seemed like the Conservatives were doing okay. They were ahead. They
Yeah.
seemed to be gaining. Do you think that was for real, or was that just, you know, we're sick of everything? We're going to say, well, yeah. And what do you think changed it? What was the turning point?
Um, I think it was a bunch of things. I think it was the fact that it was an election that started in late summer, that nobody wanted. So everybody was still away at cottages on the lake. They were camping. They were trying to find, they're trying to enjoy life without COVID. They just got their second dose. And they say, hey, I can have a barbecue with family and friends, and that's what they were doing. They weren't paying attention. The people who they were upset with Justin Trudeau, and I think that's why you said the polls. I think Aaron O'Toole had a great advantage at that platform. Um, it wasn't very scary. Like, it wasn't a huge. There wasn't anything in it that you're just like, what are you guys doing? Oh my god! Like, it was very market centric, but I thought that it was a very moderate document, until the Liberals said, hey, what about gun control? And they just kind of nosedived into that trap. And that was the problem, is that, again, when they created that document, they just looked at their the loudest people speaking in their party, and they said, oh, that they speak for all Canadians. We'll sign up. We'll do what they want to do, which was loosen up restrictions. And then again, when you do the flip flop of, oh well, we aren't, we might, we're going to do this in the double speak, it was, I think that's when you just start to see the campaign start going downhill, because he never recovered after that. He was, the question was, why should we trust you? And I don't think he could provide a decent answer for that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's it's why was the gun control even in the conservative platform? Well,
Yeah,
probably because it's kind of a quid pro quo for getting support from a bunch of those guys, right? So they have to put it in there, and in total terms of their platform, which is substantial. I mean, you can kind of wave just a small part of it at your ear, and it's that's just the environment bit. Like the conservative environment section is pretty flipping big. Um, Now, word count doesn't really, it's not the best way to
right.
judge a party, but they wrote the words, so fair enough. Uh, to here that's been put into to appease a particular interest group that's important to them is what is going to, it's basically a gift to the liberals that just keeps on giving because they find that thing uh, to pick on and they go after it and go after it and go after it. And much as you try to shut up your candidates, shutting them up doesn't help. So it's certainly been the candidate in Burlington has had gun gun rights advocates campaigning for her, and because she won't speak on the phone, I mean, it just looks worse when you won't even speak to it, when you won't even admit
Yeah.
it that it's an issue. I mean, it's just like, whoa,
Well, it's
it's
like
amateur hour.
well, it feeds into that hidden agenda script that the liberals wanted to paint the conservatives. That's what gets me, is that the conservatives kind of fell into the the liberal branding of them as this. They're secretive. They have a hidden agenda. You can't trust them. They're gonna say one thing and then do another. Dun dun dun. And instead of saying no, here we are. It's all in the document. Stand by it. That's what we're going to do. Take it or leave it. You got into this gun control double speak and flip flopping back and forth, and they bought into it. Same as the issue of abortion and provincial rights. They just kind of fell. I think that they fell into it, and they just never bothered to get out. They just doubled down on it. Um, the so you had I think at that issue it went off the rails. The last what week, I'm going to say 2 weeks of the election, we finally started talking about COVID. We finally started talking about vaccination mandates and anti-mask, and that's when I think it just sealed the fate for the conservatives, because um, Trudeau found his rock to stand on, if you will, because he's. I mean, it was great. All these people start throwing. They throw rocks and booing and hissing him on the campaign trail, and he says, no, I'm going to stand up with all the people who got vaccinated. I'm going to, all you basically, he made an us versus them argument on the campaign trail, and it paid off for him. I think that saved his campaign, because you had like, nobody wants to, unless you're an anti-vaxxer yourself, nobody wants to side with them.
Well, and I think actually Jesse Brown on the Canada Land podcast, I thought made a really good point that the turning point came when Trudeau kind of put away the Uncle Fluffy act a little bit, the kind of hello trees, hello flowers guy, and started putting
Yeah.
the boot into the far right.
Mm-hmm.
And the extent to which the PPC and the crazy people, to be quite frank, who are picketing hospitals and the rest of it, have been a gift to him, not just in the votes that are coming in right this second, but in giving him something to kick against, that it was very difficult not to kind of be at least somewhat sympathetic to him. I mean, that answer, there was a debate, the French language debate where the rebel did their thing, And then they got to ask a question, which they've been making a big fuss about. That we get treated like journalists. We get to answer a question, and they teed up an absolute beauty for the Prime Minister to smack 1,000 miles into the outfield seats.
Oh yeah, that was
Like,
that
you
that was I.
morons.
Well, and that's it's kind of like the entire right spectrum of the political dialogue just got just smacked upside the head. And the like, I mean, you look at the numbers of vaccinations in this country. There's 79% are double vaccinated, 85 plus are have at least one dose in their arms. Like, the majority of Canadians want to get these vaccinations in their arms. The 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 fact that you had the People's Party kind of, well, that's their bread and butter. That's their people, are these anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, etc. And it just seemed that the Conservative Party was going after them. The fact that the Conservative candidates could not answer clearly whether or not they're vaccinated or not. And then to say, I thought Aaron O'Toole was hounded on the campaign trail with, okay, you're going to make the journalists to get on the bus. They had to prove that they're double vaccinated, but you can't prove that your candidates are. And the fact that you said, and then when they said, okay, so if you form government, are your people going to be allowed in in Parliament if they're not vaccinated? It's just to create a safe work environment, etc. It's just such a double speak that you're just sitting going, what's going on? The last thing I just want to say on that front was, that was it. It's just like this, the double speak, because I don't remember what I was going to say. Prior to this, I told you how I got an invite from the Conservative Party to go to their campaign rally in St. Catharines, right?
Mhm.
Well, part of that was I had to prove that I was double vaccinated. I was vaccinated, or I had to
Oh,
prove
right.
and whatnot. And I thought, that's interesting. I'd have to show up and show my vaccination record to get into the venue. Yet, as we discovered, the Spectator published that not all the candidates in the Niagara region and Hamilton region will disclose their vaccination status. I thought that's the double standard that gets in people's crowd. That's what really upsets them. And that, I think, is what ultimately that's what just nosedived the Conservative campaign into the ground. They're going to hold on to some seats, but man, oh man, I don't think they misread the people big time. And there's a big anger in this country over vaccines, and I don't think it's what you think. I don't think it's we need our freedom anger. It's an anger by the rest of us who said, no, we hunkered down for a year and a half. We did our part. We got the vaccines, and now we're stuck having to wait for these assholes who go and spit on doctors, who go spit on cancer patients, who block ambulances from getting into hospitals for their very selfish reasons. And we're supposed to cater to them. And that's what I think it came down to, is that Aaron O'Toole looked like he was catering to those people because, well, we have to respect their wishes. It's like, I'm supposed to respect their wishes, and they can't respect.
Yeah.
They can't treat the doctors and nurses who literally saved our asses in the height of the pandemic, who, quite frankly, I don't think we can thank the doctors and nurses who are on the front line enough for putting themselves in harm's way for us. We're supposed to make way for these assholes, and that's, as you said, Trudeau found his rock to stand on by just saying, no, I'm not giving an inch to these people, and I think that's very appealing for a lot of folks out there.
And it's why. I mean, all these issues that the issues that actually have dominated the campaign are all issues where you could pretty much divide the country 70-30 pro and anti. So vaccines, more than 70%. I mean, obviously, we're well over 80% of people who've had at least one vaccine now. So why would any politician who has a brain give the remotest hoot about that minority of people who have an issue with it of one sort or another? I mean, it's like that's it does. It's like you don't go after the small votes. You go after the big votes. Same with guns. You know, that there's a vocal minority of people who think guns are important, but there's a minority of people in Canada. It's a very well established fact that it's just not that big of a deal for most people. Abortion, same again. You know, it's not. They're all American issues. They're none of them really important to a good I'd say. You know, I think I'm not speaking way out of line by saying about around the 70% mark on all of these. So all the time the Conservatives keep on going back to those wells or getting drawn into those wells, they're in trouble. Now, you know, we're speaking very early in the night, and it could well be that, you know, we have no Conservative government tomorrow, but not seeing that in the early results.
Not in the early results, and I just, yeah, I mean, let's look at the as we're getting into 5 minutes from polls closing in central Canada. So let's maybe take a bit of a dive into our data from as it sat before the writ was dropped. The majority of candidates in the 905 were elected MPs in the 905 were Liberals. Right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 candidates were Conservative, and then two were NDP, and those two are in Hamilton. Big surprise there. I don't know. I don't really see a lot of options for the Conservatives to win seats here.
I think that's the most surprising thing. Is going through the list. I did exactly the same thing and had exactly the same reaction as you did. That it's like, well, where are these big swings going to come from?
Right.
You know, so Stony Creek, definitely a riding that could be one that flips, but from the Liberals to the NDP could be. It's too close to call. I'd say that's a real knife edge one. But the Conservatives aren't going to pick up anything in Hamilton. We're not even 100% sure that they'll keep hold of Flamborough-Glanbrook. Flamborough-Glanbrook is a classic case that would depend on how the PPC performs. Liberals wouldn't stand a chance in the current climate if the PPC didn't exist, but they do exist, and that could be, you know, if the PPC does well, enough to tip that seat to the Liberals. So that's not a good, not looking good for the Conservatives there. You know, seats like Burlington, Oakville, Halton, Oakville, North Burlington, these are the seats that I think, you know, that they have a history of being recently Conservative, they're currently Liberal. They have to be the kind of seats that the Conservatives like have right at the top of their target list if they're going to make serious inroads.
Well, I mean, we're looking at the data here, and we're thinking of the Peel region. So you have all Brampton and Mississauga. We're looking at the data here, like the in Brampton. You have, you know, everybody there won by 47% or higher of the vote went to them. That's a huge margin. Like you have Brampton West and Brampton North. So you have Ruby Sahota and Kamal Kara. Like they had 53.5, 51% of the vote. Like it's clearly that they have right off the first ballot. If you hold going back to the ranked ballot analogy, like they would be winning on the first ballot. They clearly have a huge amount of support in those ridings. And then if you go down to Mississauga, nearly all, I think, I'm looking here, most of those ridings, if not all of them, have 50%, even close to 60% uh, of the vote. And like that's we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 ridings right there. Very solid liberal. Like you don't have a lot of chance to change that.
Yeah, I mean, you realize that all the talk of 1 or 2% swings making huge difference nationally at a local level can just mean nothing at all. Because a 1 or 2% swing in just trying to pick an example here. 1 or 2% swing. Well, actually, Thornhill's a bad example because there's a Conservative seat, which they're certainly going to win. But which is a horrible thing for volunteers to hear if you've been working away in Thornhill for for any party other than the Conservatives. But that having not paid attention to it for weeks, I'm pronouncing that the Conservatives are going to win. But that's the way it works, guys. Sorry. It's brutal, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, those win percentages that are right up there in Mississauga, 53%, 55%, 51%. You need huge percentage shifts to take those away that are not being predicted right now. So it's difficult to see how that's how the Conservatives are going to pick up anything there.
Yeah, that's the trick. I don't see how they can pull up, especially, and again, it comes down to that People's Party. It's small, but it's just enough to kind of take away that margin of error there.
Again, maybe Burlington's probably a decent example of this, of a seat that's definitely winnable by the Conservatives, or would normally be considered very winnable. That Karina Gould has held now. This will be her third election. Yeah. And it's certainly the I'm not going to be confident enough at all to say that she's going to win it, but I would say it's leaning Liberal, although you wouldn't know that from the lawn signs, and that that if the PPC are taking 5%, boy, that really could be the difference between winning and losing. So, I mean, again, it's ironic. The irony of the Conservatives being hit really hard by vote splitting is, pretty rich.
Well, it's happened before, and it'll happen again. That's just the way it kind of goes. I don't see a path to victory for the Conservatives necessarily through the 905. Truth be told, now I mean, Lord knows the polls have been famously wrong before in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That could be the case tonight. However, based on what we're seeing so far in Atlantic Canada, it looks like kind of the polls are right, and the it's as predicted.
I mean, I do think it's interesting that the Liberals have lost some seats. I have to say I don't know enough about the current sort of political situation in Atlantic Canada to really pass much of a comment on that. So they lost seats. So that those are seats that if they need to get back, right, somewhere. So where are they going to pick those up? Elsewhere in Canada, it seems like Western Canada is pretty much a done deal as well. Alberta, Saskatchewan, they're going to go Conservative, and that's just the way it's been. So where are the areas that they really can swing? I mean, I think there are some places in BC that can have big swings. The 905 is definitely one of the areas that should be open to major swings from one party to another. And obviously Quebec is a law unto itself. But It's not looking like any of those are going to kind of light up the radar too much right now.
I don't see any writings necessarily that are, we should be really scared of. I don't, definitely not in the region of where we live. I'm not. I'm just not picturing a lot of a lot of hiccups and a lot of a lot of upset wins here. I'm just clicking at the CBC website, and they've got, Brampton East.
Yeah, we're starting to get
Um,
Ontario come in now.
Liberals are leading there, but that's again no surprise. Um, I suspect this is just going to be. My predictions for tonight will be we're going to see a return to say this is going to be like a what's the point election. At the end of the night, we're going to see a return of a liberal minority. I'm suspecting, um, and it'll be people will look back and say, why did we do this? What was the point?
Yeah, yeah. We're now looking at, okay, Liberals down one, Conservatives up four. So the real losers in Eastern Canada actually were New Democrats lost two, and the Greens lost their seat. I mean, they'll be
Yep.
pretty gutted about that, I'd imagine. And surprising that the NDP would, surprising that the NDP would do so badly. To be honest.
Well, I don't know how much campaigning Jagmeet Singh actually did out east. I suspect part of it is, um, I think it was just a lackluster performance by the NDP. I mean, like, but in the last 2 weeks of the campaign, like, can you think of anything that Jagmeet Singh or any NDP candidate did that really kind of shook things up or really made people focus on them? Um,
Yeah, I mean, and we both know plenty of people who are volunteers and supporters of the NDP, just as we know plenty of people in all the parties, really, apart from the PPC. um, uh, it's tough for them to hear us say this, maybe, but this is the second election that Jagmeet Singh's had, and no, I did a comparison one day where I looked at the leaders' tweets to see who was being the most negative, and actually, the actual tweets coming from Justin Trudeau and Erin O'Toole were unilaterally entirely positive. They didn't go negative on their personal Twitter accounts. Now, I'm not going to pretend that the negativity isn't going on. It's coming from other places, sure. And then I looked at Jagmeet Singh's account, and it was all directed at Justin Trudeau, just time and time again. A lot of it, whatever. I think it's a bad look for a leader, to be honest. Like, if you want to be, this is a quote that I stole from one of my least favorite people, which is Tony Blair. Just if you want to be the government, you have to look like the government when you're in opposition. If you're in opposition and you're looking like a pressure group, you'll get the votes of a pressure group, which is we don't want a pressure group running the country. You got to do that kind of statesman-like thing, and when certainly very often the messaging that will come from third parties in general is we're the ones that are different, who don't play by the rules of these other guys. That's why you need to trust us this time. And then you look at what they're saying, and it's all these guys suck. These guys suck. Well, you're undermining your own messaging right there.
yeah.
Actually,
On that note, Steve Paikin had an excellent point on comparing politics to like any other industry. Like, can you imagine if politics was the airline industry and every airline just said, "Oh my God, their planes always fall into the sky. They're the worst. They're the worst airline ever. Like, why would anyone trust anything on their airline? Ha 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 ha." And it turned out, like, would anybody actually bother to fly if you just think, oh, I think, and that's again,
it's a
that's
fundamental rule of advertising, of marketing.
that's kind of like why do we let this happen in our political discourse? And I again, I'm going to come back to my takeaway from this election is that our political class is out of touch with what people care about, what's most important to people. I'm going to give Kyle another props on on our comments section. He said that out in Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia, the Nova Scotia fishing dispute hurt the Liberals for sure.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it necessarily hurt them. I mean, I'm not necessarily seeing it here in the results per se. The
Something hurt the NDP because that's a
Yeah,
big loss for them. Two seats. I mean, we're still talking about small numbers. Actually, now the Liberals are back at zero, a net zero. So back to where the night started. Conservatives +3, Bloc down 2, NDP down 1. So the Conservatives have picked up, but not from the Liberals. Wow.
no.
That's interesting. It looks like the Greens are leading in 1 seat. Okay, can only think that's Guelph at the moment. But I would imagine that's a very early result. Just bear with us as the silent periods while we look at what you're probably getting read out loud to you from your television.
Don't listen to television.
Yeah, television sucks, man.
It rots your brain.
Anybody else out there? Thanks to everybody who's tuned in. I'm really kind of pleased that we've had a decent number of people listening to us. That's awesome, and that you've been taking part in the conversations. Keep firing questions at us, or anything that we haven't spoken about that you think we have done, anything that we're completely off base about, and
We'll tell you why you're wrong.
we'll tell you why you're wrong, or election nights are fun because they're. Well, I think I remember back before I came to Britain, someone saying, it's the one evening of the year of every 4 years or every 2 years where politicians have to be completely honest because the results are the results are the results, right? Now, actually, I've seen in recent years that they aren't even honest about the results anymore, and that they'll spin, getting absolutely tanked in riding X as not bad news at all, which I really wonder what the point of that is. But there's nothing quite like it, I guess.
Yeah, I was just saying here, we're starting to get some more results coming in the 905. I see here Niagara Center. Vance Badaway of the Liberals is leading by 54 votes against the Conservatives, which is, I guess, to be expected somewhat. I mean, he is the incumbent. I thought that was interesting. The other day, I drove through Niagara, down by there, and again, the People's Party signs and the Conservative signs that I saw out there were quite something. I'm a little surprised that he's winning, but I guess that might be just a sign of my, not toot my own horn, but my theory of that the PPC and the Conservatives are going after the same shallow pool of voters.
Yeah. And the Conservatives' desire or habit, which surely began under Stephen Harper to extent. I mean, Stephen Harper did it successfully. Was the point? He unified the right, and he realized who was going to vote for him, and he realized that a lot of people, those people who were never going to vote for him were never going to vote for him. So don't bother saying anything to them. What's the point of talking to them? Mm-hmm. However, I think that's now gone so far that it's really hurting them, and it means because they're only going after that sort of maximum 35 kind of % of the vote at their core demographic, that they're very open to any kind of fragmentation.
Yeah, it's I think it'll turn into their Achilles heel. The idea of let's shore up it might be one of those things of the political parties need to start changing their strategy books for the 21st century, because they're still kind of going for this late 20th mentality of let's just get our people and get our supporters kind of solidified, and we'll just get them to the polls, and that's enough for us to win. I'm beginning to think that's no longer the case. You know, the idea of let's just get our people riled up and go to the polls might not be enough here in Canada. I'm not thinking that the Conservatives are just not giving themselves enough room to go to have a path for election.
Yeah, I just pouring myself some cooling grape juice, um, which is probably very bad. But I hope people at home are enjoying the election with some snacks or some libations of some sort, because I feel it's a necessary component. Um, so let's change the subject for a bit. Give ourselves a break from tonight for a few minutes until we get some maybe some more significant polls in from the 905. You were a campaign manager back in 2000. What was
11.
it? 11? Yeah.
Yep.
And I was a lowly volunteer on the same campaign. What's election night like for a campaign manager when you're right there on the front line?
It's for me. It was very weird, um, because you spend like the entire campaign kind of guiding the ship. You're steering the ship where it has to go, and you try and get your teams out to the poll, and you're worried about money. You're worried about, oh my gosh, I need to go do this fundraiser, and can we go ask these people for a donation? And you have a million things going on, and then election day happens, and you don't do anything because you probably have an election chair, and you take everything and you just hand it off to them, and they're the ones who are in charge of getting the door knockers and getting your campaign teams out to the various polling stations and to get the door knocks and everything. And I didn't do anything. I felt very weird because before this, as you know, like we were volunteers, so even on election day I'd be volunteering to go to a polling station, and I'd be the one knocking on doors, leaving the door hangers and all that stuff. And then when you're a campaign manager, you all of a sudden sit there going, I don't really have anything to do.
I'm not the boss anymore.
I'm not the boss anymore. And so I would go.
Yeah.
So I remember saying, I said, I'll just drive people around. So somebody, like people, volunteers would show up and say, hey, I'm here to help. And they would say, hey, this person at this polling station needs some extra volunteers. So I say, okay, get in my car. I'll drive you over, because you don't really do anything. And then right now, if you're an election, if you're a campaign manager, you are sitting in your campaign office just hitting refresh on the computer, waiting for your ride to show up, because there's literally nothing you can do.
Actually, I wasn't a campaign officer on election night once, which was 2014, because I was the poll number. I was in charge of a spreadsheet basically, because I could do a spreadsheet that added numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that night, and that was the time we won. So that was kind of special, and seeing the numbers coming right in front of you from your own polls and your own thing, and I realized it was going to be a really good night. It's like, oh, you won that one. I mean, and just having, well, you know exactly that. The party, well, it was the Liberals. It was the Liberals. We're not members anymore, guys. You know this by now. It'd been close for a long time. It had been close in recent years in Burlington, but it always seemed we were falling short, and it was very difficult to be confident that you would sort of get to the promised land. And then when you first saw those first results, it's like, oh, we're not just winning; we're winning fairly well here. And they kept coming in. And the poll prediction that night was for a minority government, I think it was very much a too close to call state of affairs. And the actual result was a majority Liberal government for Kathleen Wynne, with a whole load of seats switching from Conservative to Liberal. That's quite something when you to be part of that, and to and really, I was as shocked as anybody seeing those numbers. It's like, are you kidding me? Really, really? What's going on?
Yeah, see, I didn't get that experience. I got the hitting refresh and slowly
Yeah,
seeing that, that path to victory slowly erode, and that is the downside of that is you end up, you really like you really do start second guessing yourself. You start thinking like, should I put people in this neighborhood? Should I have done a mailer on that last week? Should I have really like kind of hammered home the message to this group or not? And yeah, you'll spend like the next week just like, did I do that? Actually, no, I'm gonna lie. I lied there. The day of, the next day, you just like, okay, it's done. I'm not doing anything. I remember I kind of had to go into the campaign office because I was like, I need to clean up a bit, but it was just yeah, I was just kind of like, I was as fugue state. You're just like, it's done. It's done. Like
and
after,
for anybody who's not been involved in that kind of thing, you have no idea how hard the campaign managers, in particular, like a campaign that has a chance of winning, will have. I mean, you were a professional staffer who got
yeah,
assigned to this campaign to be the manager. You're expected to work every hour that you possibly can. You know, during the whole campaign, there's no days off. There's no time off. You have to make sure the candidate's working at the same level. It's there's a real heavy responsibility on those guys, and yeah, you see politics from another side, being involved from that side, and it's sucky when you lose, that's for sure, and for candidates who lose. Much worse for candidates who have won, who then lose. I've not met a politician who has been to Parliament or legislature who subsequently ceased to go to Parliament or legislature against their preferences, who wasn't very affected by that, because it's a popularity contest at the end of the day. Now, however much you can look at the say take the 2018 election. If you happen to be a Liberal MPP at that time, there was a tidal wave coming, and you had nothing much to do with it. There was you could not stand in the way of that, so you can't really blame yourself too much to say, well, there's something I could have done that should have changed that. It doesn't make a bit of difference. You still feel really bad. These are things that it's a shame more people don't know about, because it does give a human face to the whole thing. That these are human beings, both the volunteers and the campaign managers and the candidates who are not monsters by and large. And it's a tough job, and it's all about timing and being in the right place at the right time and running in the right election and all that stuff.
I do want to point out here. We're looking at some of the results coming in, and there's a couple things that kind of, I don't think this is I don't want to say this is a trend so far, but this is something that I thought is kind of interesting. So Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, which was the seat held by Leona, I'm going to pronounce this right, Alislev, who was originally the Liberal candidate or Liberal MP who crossed the floor and is now the Conservative candidate for Aurora Oak Ridges. Only one poll coming in so far, but the Liberals are leading there. Same as in Dufferin-Caledon. It's a small lead, but I thought that was interesting because the Dufferin-Caledon was a Tory riding. Now, I don't think it's enough that I'd say for sure.
And it could be that the urban polls get counted more quickly.
Most likely. most likely.
So it could be. I mean,
Ni-
we're talking about leads of like 3 votes and 1 vote in a couple of places. So.
and the same goes with Niagara West, which is Dean Allison. Um, Liberals are leading. Again, it's just the first couple polls coming, but I thought that was interesting because we see in um, uh, other polls outside the 905, conservative leading conservative held ridings are leaning conservative. Same as in Durham, Aaron O'Toole's riding is he's in the lead. So I just thought that was interesting that right off the gate we're not seeing that conservative domination in the 905.
Well, yeah, it's not like there's the most you can say that is that it's nothing surprising. I think that may be the way to put it. Yeah, I mean it's so early, but Hamilton West, Ancaster, Dundas, that would be that would certainly be a seat. I mean it's provincially it's a Conservative seat.
No, Ancaster West, Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas is held by Philomena Tassi.
Yeah, no, I was saying provincially it's Conservative.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it was Ted McMeekan's seat for many years. It's now her name's gone out of my head. And never mind, it'll come back to me.
Donna Skelly.
Donna Skelly, that's it. And yeah, I mean, so the Liberals out to an early lead there. Yeah, I mean, much too small numbers to really make any sense of there. Other than that, the Liberals have got ahead in as many votes have been counted. So,
I'd be curious to see if this is the start of a trend. But yeah, in Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas, Philomena Tassi is leading Roberto Enriquez, who we had on the podcast to share the liberal support. Same as in Burlington. It looks like Karina Gold is leading.
Looking at the national picture, it looks like the NDP have sort of made up their early losses out east, are now 1 seat up, and the Conservatives are down 6. Is that right? What am I? Is this just Ontario? I think maybe this is just Ontario I'm looking at actually. So scrub that, guys. That's not a number that you need to worry about.
Well, I'm seeing here the New Democrats are leading in at least 9 ridings at the moment. Yeah, with 16.9% of the vote share right now. But right now, Liberals have a sizable lead in terms of leading or elected members right now. Now, again, it's too early to say for certain, but
I mean, obviously, we know the Conservatives will storm through the West and pick up huge numbers of seats there. So the Liberals have to be ahead in the first part of the night. But certainly no great evidence of the polls being wrong so far.
That's the tricky thing is like that for a while we thought that the polls were going to be polling was such an issue for a while, but I think that the polls tend to have figured out how to make it work. I'm curious to see how the which poll got it right so far.
Yeah, well, let's all head over to 338.com or whatever it is.
Well, I'm looking at a friend of the podcast, Mike Gibbs, shared a tweet from the CBC on the popular vote right now. Right now, the Liberals are sitting at 42.2% of the popular vote. Typically, you need 38.5 apparently for a majority. That seems to be the threshold. So they might be in. They might be in a majority territory in terms of popular vote, but that's going to be the tricky thing because if you remember the last election, the Conservatives were trying to play that they won the popular vote nonsense, but they seem to forget that doesn't really work in a parliamentary electoral system. But if the Liberals have that popular vote, um,
Yeah, and well, and also further on that whole we won the popular vote. They didn't win the popular vote. They just got more than the Liberals, which is a very different thing from saying you won anything. But that's there I go again with my my crazy balloting obsession. But so far, yeah, the sort of poll of polls at 338 Canada was predicting the Liberals to have 31.9% and the Conservatives to have 31.4%. And thus far, the Liberals are polling substantially ahead of that. But again, I guess you would kind of predict that, would you? I mean, I guess with Quebec and the East making up the bulk of the votes.
yeah, I think it makes sense. Um, yeah, some interesting upsets here in terms of the polling. Brampton Center. So the Conservatives are leading the Liberals, which I thought was interesting. Same as in Mississauga Lakeshore. Conservatives have taken the lead there.
Yeah.
And then in Niagara West, the Conservatives have come back to take the lead there as well. So it's, I think we're going to see a bit of this back and forth
Yeah.
going on in the in the region throughout the night as well. But
I'll just share with people, uh, just for the hell of it, really, that how when I first came to Canada, and I think the first election I watched was the Ernie Eves election. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It was Chrétien's last election. That was the one. And I was watching the television, and it's like, what's all this thing about like leading by 10 votes? Like how's that work? Because that's not how it's done in other places in the world. In Britain, you have to count. There's no results until every vote is counted, and which takes hours and hours and hours. So you tend to get your first early results come in around midnight, and it's not done and dusted until the very early hours of the morning. Which so it felt very strange. The first election I watched for it all to be sort of all done by the shouting within about an hour, as I recall. I mean, I guess it wasn't quite that quick, but a very different way of counting, and a really efficient way of counting over here. I've got to say, the way that the votes are counted in the polling place by the scrutineers is it's a good system. It gets through stuff really quickly.
yeah, we're just waiting on some more results to come in, and that's the
Yeah, I mean, right now the map of Ontario has a lot more red in it than you would expect in rural parts. I can't believe that that's gonna stick. However, the NDP are leading where you'd expect them to lead, up around Timmins, Sudbury. So it's odd that I can only think that it's maybe the more urban parts of those rural ridings counting their polls more quickly than some of the more rural ones.
oh, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine it had some. It must be where those votes are coming in for sure. Um, yeah, it's just like the map is kind of going along. I'm not seeing a lot of upset wins necessarily. I think Thunder Bay, Rainy River, Conservatives are in the lead there. That's a bit of a shocker. Um,
And that is Parry Sound Muskoka. I know who was the incumbent is there.
Scott Aitchison.
Okay, so um,
Yeah, it's
okay, yeah, he. I mean, that's actually a lead of a few hundred votes rather than one or two. Um, it's probably more reflective of a reality than some of the other ones.
yeah. I think we're going to get into some of these, like those ridings around the border of the 905, where we kind of border onto your more rural parts of the province. That's where you're going to get the. I think you're going to see like the back and forth, the back and forth battle going. So
Yeah, I guess what we could do right now is start to get an early sense of how the PPC are doing and what kind of vote totals they're getting in the early.
well, right now it looks like they're getting four. Like they're pulling about 4.5%. They're getting the same. Uh, the kind of the what's amazing though is that they're pulling a bigger vote share than the Green Party at the moment. But yet, again, the Green Party are leading or in at least one riding.
I mean, the Greens have kind of made that their thing, that they would not kind of fall for what the PPC will be doing, which is having a pretty good level of good being relative, good level of support, but spread out over all the ridings, and kind of taking the policy of putting all their eggs in one basket. I'm just trying to work out where that basket is right now.
Well, I think it's interesting. You see that the Liberals have gained 5 seats, while the Conservatives have lost 5.
Yeah. I mean
mean,
that includes projections, but yeah.
that includes projections, but I mean that's not the trend that you kind of want to see if you are Aaron O'Toole right now.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
You'd like to see a little bit more of your support going towards so you like to see a little bit more upset victories, but like I'm seeing some upsets here for the Liberals in these ridings. That's the amazing part to me.
I mean, just coming back to the Greens for a minute, I think we have to say this has been an absolute disastrous election for the Greens.
Oh yes,
and they have to look long and hard at. I mean, it was the longest suicide note in history, or whatever, as the cliche goes. In the one place where Anna Meeple was able to actually be seen, that the general consensus was that she performed very well. It seemed, or that was the consensus anyway. I'm not passing any comment, but the damage had already been done, I think, by what the party had been doing in the previous 6 months. So all the kind of good work, or all the progress that had been done by Elizabeth May, sort of undone in a fell swoop, and time will tell. I mean, how much, what that's all about, and how what whether that was it's a strange one, that whole story.
well, I think it's I put it entirely on her. She was elected as leader, and it's very clear either there were elements in the party that did not want her there for whatever reason, whether it's for racist, sexist, or just disgruntled members who didn't get the person that they wanted in there. Um, I don't want to say it's entirely her fault, but part of if you're the leader, you kind of have to take charge of your party and stamp those elements out. I mean, there's a bit of a ruthlessness to politics that you need to you need to show. She didn't really show that, and I think she let this kind of fester and grow. And the sad thing is, the Greens did it to themselves. They had such great momentum coming into this with Elizabeth May exiting, and it kind of you kind of had a chance to bring in some fresh blood, fresh face, um, and really kind of make an impact on the political scene federally. And instead, the party just kind of tore itself. I really don't know if they'll recover uh, after this election. I don't know. Like if they do, they're kind of back to square one. All the gains that Elizabeth May made in terms of being a force in Canadian politics, I think kind of will have been undone uh, after this election.
Oh, it shows that thing of loyalty to the leader is always a killer. Um, you
Hmm.
know, in politics, you really have to support whoever the leader is, come hell or high water, through thick and thin. You
Yep.
cannot be divided in that way and expect not to be absolutely destroyed
Well,
when the polls
I
come
mean,
out.
look at the Liberals. Liberals had to go through Dion and Ignatieff, and both those leaders had to deal with massive infighting and massive backstabbing behind the scenes, even during their campaigns. And we're hearing rumors in the Toronto Star. There were rumors of the same thing happening to Aaron O'Toole, that there's a bit of an infight to kind of
I
oust
I,
him. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see what happens
I
after this
dare
election.
anybody to look at Pierre Polivo's Twitter account and not say that he's been running a leadership campaign since the start of the year. I mean, he never mentions the leader. He talks only about himself. Um, yeah, I mean, it seems completely obvious to me that he is just waiting to throw his hat into the ring in a leadership race. So, got a question in from Justin. Thanks, Justin, for that. It's a great question as well. What percentage of the overall vote is required for official party status, etc.? Could PPC gain it and Greens lose it?
I don't think it's a matter of percentage of the vote. It's number of seats. You need
Yeah.
seats in the legislature, or sorry, in the parliament to actually gain official party status. Um, I don't know what I don't know what the number is. I want to say it's like it's 12 or something. I think it's a percent. It breaks down in terms of the percentage of 338 seats. I should know this, but I don't. But
I don't. I
I
mean, the Greens won't have had it before anyway. I mean, they're. It's one of those weird phrases because they're a party. They're in Parliament. Of course, they're an official party. However, there's money and offices and
yeah.
bureaucracy that goes along with that. That is a huge
Well,
help.
the big thing is each party, like the reason why you want that is each party has a research bureau. You know, the conservatives would have theirs, the NDP have theirs, and of course the liberals have theirs, and that's like your secret weapon almost in politics. They will sit there and they will do your campaign research for you almost as your, you know, if you need to pick apart your opposition, you know, did they say something and did they not follow through? What's the cost of this? And that really is your that's what you want. You want that office. I mean, the budget varies based on the number of MPs you have in the government, or sorry, in the parliament. However, um, the Greens didn't have it. The Greens just had, I think, Elizabeth May and one or two other people.
So they had
Um,
two seats, didn't they? The one out east and the one
well, they
out
had
west.
three.
Oh,
They
did
had
they?
three, and then they
Oh
lost
goodness.
Jenica Atwin
Oh right,
to the Liberals.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, what I think will happen is the danger with the PPC winning a seat isn't that they get a party status; it's that they do get to say things like that candidate gets to stand up in the House of Commons and ask a question during question period. And I guarantee you, it's not going to be just some, you know, question about spending. It's going to be something pretty inflammatory, something pretty outrageous, because that's what will get on the news that night.
It's and I need to remind myself where Bernier's riding is, but that'll be an interesting one because I think he's the only person who could potentially actually win something. I don't think he's that close. But yeah, that party status certainly it turns you from from a couple of politicians in Parliament into an organisation in Parliament, which is why it's so important to them.
I should point out that help off camera just sent me a message that you must have at least 12 seats to get that official recognition, and
There's
to get the money.
our unpaid researchers at work.
Yeah, yes. There's a lot of magic happening off screen. But yes, I mean, like, that's the PPC that's ultimately what the Green and the PPC want to attain, probably in the immediate future. It's unrealistic that I mean, that you'd hope that, oh my gosh, we're going to form government, but realistically, no, that's not happening. You got to do this incrementally. That would be that I imagine would be their ultimate goal, is to get that status that they can start getting the research and the funding, because then you can do the mailings and stuff. Remember the Conservatives had where they shuffled around the mailing feature, so you could mail your newsletters across and all that. That's what they would love to see.
But certainly, well, I was going to say, it used to be that Britain regularly had members of the IRA kind of elected to Parliament, but they never actually took the seats, which was
I want to go back to the map here, because we're getting some more numbers coming in. There's a couple of things that I want to point out. So Niagara Falls, which was conservative, 10 polls are reporting in. The Liberals are leading by 29 votes. Andrea Kaiser, who we did have on the podcast way back in the day, long before she even threw her hat in the ring politically. We had her on. She was to talk about the wine industry in the region. She was one of our. She was one of our very first guests on. She is running for the Liberals. She's taking the lead down in Niagara Falls, that'll be a bit of an upset.
That's 10 polls out of 245. Well, it's not nothing.
It's not nothing. It's just you don't have in the St. Catharines. Chris Biddle is losing to the Conservatives. Again, it's only by 8 votes, but that I thought was interesting because of the story of vandalism and what he perceived as threats to his person on the campaign trail. That's interesting. Flamborough Glanbrook, Liberals are leading. Vito Scro is leading it right there. Interesting.
It's 1 poll, that's very early there. Philomena Tassi, 12 polls, leading. Hamilton Centre, no surprise, the NDP leading there. Hamilton Mountain, Liberals leading so far, but very, very early days.
I think Dufferin Caledon is interesting. I mean, we have 9 more polls have come in, and we're still seeing a Liberal lead holding there. Too much to say for sure, too early to say for sure. But Dufferin Caledon is a typically conservative riding. That kind of surprises me a bit. I'm seeing it look around here. Yeah, we've got same as Aurora, Oak Ridge, Richmond Hill. The Liberals are leading there, which I thought is interesting, considering that Leona Aleslov was a Liberal, switched across the floor to run for the Conservatives. I believe she won the last election, but now the Liberals seem to be going after her there.
Liberals seem to be well ahead in Guelph, albeit with 5 polls. You think they would do better in Guelph because they have a Green MPP, but so far not seeing that.
Actually, where the Greens are leading is in Kitchener Centre.
Yeah. It's based on one poll. I'm wondering if that's the university or something that, well, I don't know.
Yeah, it's as the map's starting to fill in, it's becoming more interesting. I doubt this is going to stay the way, but in Durham, the Liberals have taken the Conservatives in the lead. I doubt that'll stay, but I find that interesting.
There's an awful lot of red on the map at the moment that doesn't seem like it can possibly stay that way. If it does, it's a very good night for the Liberals.
It is. This is. Yeah, I mean, if the 905 stays the way it's looking like right now, that
They'll be getting majority.
well, it looks like they'll be definitely, it'd be a lot easier for sure. I mean, I would argue the message there would be, the message would be that there's serious work that needs to be done for the Conservatives. If the map stays the way that it's going right now, there's a lot of ridings here that are supposed to be traditional conservative held, like easy conservative wins, and it looks like there's a bit of a fight going on for these ridings, and that's what I find so fascinating. Like Dufferin-Caledon, the Liberals are in the lead, and I'm wondering. I mean, we'd have to go into the data definitely, but I look at this stuff and I wonder how much of the People's Party factors into it.
Well, yeah, and that might actually, in those early results, see what kind of percentages the PPC are getting in those early polls, because if it is kind of 9-10% rather than 4-5%, then that could be very, very damaging. And if the PPC do better in Conservative seats than they do in Liberal seats, if you see what I mean, that would hit the Conservatives sort of triply hard. Just shout out to everybody that if you are watching and you want to do us a solid, throw the link up onto Twitter, share it with your friends, and we'd really appreciate that. We hope you're enjoying everything that's going on so far. It's I know it's good. Joel and I are pretty good at talking, which is just as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at. Yeah, I'm just looking at the. I kind of want to look at Durham here, and Jonathan Giancroce, who's the Liberal candidate there, has 54% of the votes reported by now. And I should point out there are 0 votes for the People's Party. I mean, that's, again, it's really early, but man, oh man, like that's you don't expect to see that.
Yeah. Well, in Burlington, 12 polls. It's not looking good out of those 12 polls for the Conservatives, who certainly would have been hoping to get much closer. It's 50% Liberal, 32% Conservative at the moment. NDP 12. Again, PPC polling ahead of the Greens at 3%. But small number of polls, but that in Burlington, there's not like some polls are wildly different from other ones, so that could well be reasonably representative of where we could be ending up. You'd expect to see the Conservatives doing better out of 12 polls.
I just want to interrupt here. Kyle just sent out some message, and it's something that I did see on. I have Twitter open as well to just keeping a monitor on everything here. CTV apparently is announcing a Liberal win, which is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I wouldn't do that.
I'm not.
I know they want to be first and everything, but like,
I'm not
insulting to the people out west.
I'm not willing to call it just yet. but also I got nowhere to go. So, but there's that. I'd rather just sit here and look into all this stuff. Like, I mean, the question again is going to be liberal minority or majority at this point,
It
if
does seem to
that's
be
the
looking
case.
that way. I mean, that's the way it's edging. Because
Well,
the real problem is like if the Conservatives aren't making serious inroads in Ontario, they don't seem to, nothing's setting the world alight in Quebec. Then where the hell else are they going to get those seats from? Because out west they've already got them all. And again, it
yeah,
comes back to that thing that we've been talking about kind of all night. That if you're going to craft every election around what makes people in Alberta happy, then yeah, you're going to win Alberta. But that ain't really what the game's about. So it sort of give it that the old really super cynical politicians' view of things.
hmm
You don't pander to the people who are going to vote for you anyway. And many would argue that that's why certainly during the 80s and 90s, parties that were traditionally more left wing moved towards the right because they kind of felt that, well, the guys who vote always vote for us, are always going to vote for us. We don't need to make promises. We need to go after those middle class people who are scared about taxation or scared about affordability and things like that. Don't worry about the people who. And that's a really sucky attitude. Not endorsing that for a second, but that's kind of what the Conservatives have been doing. It seems to me for the last however many years, and it just ain't a winning proposition for them.
Well, we just as we were talking, some of the map filled in, and it looks like Flamborough Glambrook just switched over to the Conservatives again, away from Vito Scro. Um, and we saw that Hamilton East Stony Creek is going NDP, so the NDP would take that away uh, uh, from the Liberals. However, it'd be a push in Hamilton because right now it looks like the Liberals are leading the NDP on up on the mountain, Hamilton Mountain, and they would take that seat away from the NDP. So, you know, oh no, we just got news here. CBC News is projecting a Liberal government. Um, so
Well, and the Liberal lead in the mountain is not nothing either. I mean, it's 8 polls out of 155. Um,
but they're leading by 139 votes. Like that's not
it's not nothing, no.
that's not what you want to see,
Hmm.
for sure.
That would be kind of a surprise. I guess there's no incumbent there, and that always does put the cat amongst the pigeons. Um, who was the previous MP there? I really should know.
Sorry, which I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry.
Hamilton Mountain.
Um, up on Hamilton Mountain. Oh my goodness. Um,
It wasn't Christopherson, is it? No.
no, that was Hamilton Center.
Really showing our ignorance here, people. Sorry, but I would be shocked if the Liberals took one from the NDP in Hamilton. I have to say.
I don't know. Lisa Hupner was a pretty good candidate, from what I understand, and she has the kind of the credentials to back that up. I'd be curious to see how that goes. I'm seeing, yeah, Peel is starting to fill in red as we suspected. We're still waiting on Mississauga Malton to come in on that way, and I'm still waiting to hear from about Milton and Oakville North Burlington. Pam Damoff and Adam Van Coverden are the MPs there. And we had
Last
Adam Van
time,
Coverden on.
yeah, we obviously had Adam on, and he had over 50% of the vote in the last election, and taking it from a very prominent Conservative in Lisa Raitt, a well-known
Yep.
figure. And it would take an awful lot to turn that around. That's for sure. I mean, we're not seeing any results from there yet. I think the riding association, the Conservative riding association in Milton, well, there were questions that they basically kicked Lisa Raitt out. Even didn't even give her the kind of the respect of being on the board of directors,
Right.
which can happen, but doesn't speak well to what was going on there.
Just going to point out comment in the feed. I read that neither Trudeau nor O'Toole can afford a loss tonight. That the party will opt for a new leader if defeated. Thoughts, Roland? What's your thoughts?
Probably, yeah. I would say if Trudeau were to lose, he would have to go. I mean, he's an interesting guy. The last election should have been a cakewalk for the Liberals, and they really botched it against a weak Conservative leader. And this has also not been a stellar performance, I don't think. All that kind of hope and optimism from 2015. No, I mean, nobody holds onto that kind of new car smell for that long, do they? But I don't see that Trudeau could come back from it when there are some really potentially good leadership candidates waiting in the wings. As for O'Toole, my only question is who's going to do it better? Well, I mean, we know for a fact that Polivo is already out there on the stump. So I would think there will be plenty of people who want a leadership election who didn't want O'Toole in the first place, and will be gunning for him. So, yeah.
I think definitely O'Toole, and I think this is part of the problem with that conservative mindset is that the conservatives right now aren't defined necessarily by a policy or an objective. They're defined by Trudeau. They're defined by their hatred of Trudeau, and all they want is a leader who will defeat them. It doesn't even matter what you have to do. That's a problem for the conservatives. O'Toole was never like I was amazed that they picked O'Toole to begin with. Honestly, he nothing about him struck me as very charismatic or just like wow, like he's really got a shot at it. He kind of struck me as milquetoast. And I think that's what we're seeing. Is that,
yeah, sorry, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I was just gonna say like this is it. Like the conservatives don't, they don't suffer fools lightly. I guess is the way to say it. I think that if he's smart today, he'd pull Paul Martin, he'd stand up at the microphone and say, "I'm resigning as leader of the Conservative Party," and just walk away, walk away.
CBC is starting to call individual ridings now.
Mm-hmm.
Scarborough, so this in the 905. So Scarborough Rouge Park, they've called for the Liberals, leading by 2,000 votes. Scarborough North calling for the Liberals, leading by 1,000 votes. Mississauga Centre, they've called for the Liberals, 1,000 votes, and Niagara West, they've called for the Conservatives, leading by 600 votes. None of those are particularly surprising, I don't think. Very much as you would expect. The Liberals are leading in downtown in some Toronto ridings. Parkdale High, very early days though. And in Davenport. And if they did go on to win those, that would be good. I mean, they would see that as a major success. They had no Toronto ridings. Kind of astonishingly, really, no Toronto ridings after the last election.
Well, that comes down to it is you don't. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if you look at if you start looking at the entire map of the country. It looks like there's so much blue out there, but there really isn't. Like there's so much. The population lives in the urban centers. It's you got to go into the Lower Mainland in BC, Vancouver, and whatnot, Calgary and Edmonton, the 905 here in Ontario, Montreal Island, and then and the lakes. things like gun control do not play well here. You have pockets of gun enthusiasts, and people say, "Oh, you're overreaching." But in terms of a campaign winner, no, it's not in the 905. Uh, and that's what like the conservative kind of have to start looking at the numbers, looking at exactly what's going on there. They close themselves off for a path to victory here, time and time again.
Yeah, every time they talk about guns, every time they talk about every time they talk about vaccines, every time they talk about abortion, it's good news for the it's good news for the Liberals. Milton's just come in with his early results, early numbers now, with out of Vancouver leading with 48% of the vote, with just 3 polls reporting though. So it seems in closer ridings the People's Party do less well, with maybe 4%, and the Greens also on 4%. In ridings where it'd be interesting to look at Niagara West actually. So Niagara West 6% PPC. Well, the signs certainly aren't turning into huge votes, but 6% is still, I mean, after I think a lot of people thought the PPC were just finished after the last election, and I mean they're not.
Well, if you go down to the gains and losses, you'll see like the New Democrats are, I guess technically they are could view this as a win. They've gained 7 seats across the country. Liberals have only lost 1 at the moment, and conservatives have lost 2, which again is not what you want to see if you're Aaron O'Toole right now. You got to be sitting there wondering, like reading the writing on the wall and saying, how do I take this as my walk in the snow and say tonight I'm going to back out.
Well, if they're going to keep on trying to win the election by the same rules, I mean, fair enough. The big change this time was that the last election they were gunning for the carbon tax and the kind of climate denialism for really, I think we can say, and they threw that in the dumpster. And good, because it was a vote loser and they weren't getting anywhere with that one. So one less policy, one less kind of policy that was just a more of a religious war than a policy. It was just like we're conservative, we have to go on about the environment and say it's all nonsense. They got rid of that, but they're still making the same mistake, it seems to me, with all these other things that just dominate people's thoughts when they think about the Conservatives. And until they change that, it's going to be tough for them to make a whole lot of progress. 4 polls reporting Glanbrook now. Looks like the Conservatives may be edging that one, which would be a Conservative hold. Although I believe with a new pretty sure with a new MP.
I want to talk a bit about Hamilton for a second there, because right now, we're looking at Hamilton Center. It looks like it'll stay NDP, but we're looking at the Liberals might take away Hamilton Mountain from the NDP, which I find that's bad. That's a bit shocking. It might be bad news for the NDP in the region, because they'll only have one seat in the region. In the entire 905.
Assuming Stony Creek stays where it is at the moment, the Liberals are edging it in Stony Creek. I honestly thought the Liberals might get. Oh, I don't think Philomena. I thought Philomena Tassi was in a strong position. I thought Stony Creek was a very good chance that might fall to the NDP. At the moment, the NDP are in 3rd place, but I'm not sure if that's going to stay that way though.
Well, I should also point out that right now Brampton East has been reported. Meninder Sidhu is going to be the MP. He's Liberal there, so congratulations to him.
It's looking more and more to me like Burlington's going to the Liberals.
Yeah, that lead keeps growing there. Which I do want to talk about Burlington for a second, because you and I live here, and this is our literally our backyard. We try to stay out of it because we don't want to be posed bias. But I do want to say, I want to ask, what did you think about the campaign happening here in Burlington? Just as you drove around town and you saw what was happening around the city, what did you think of what happened here?
Well, all you can tell as a general rule is the signs, right? I've been telling the story for years about the Ignatieff election, where if you drove around Burlington, you would have been convinced that the Liberals were about to storm the city, and the incumbent Conservative, Mike Wallace, was going to lose his job. No such thing. I mean, Mike Wallace won handily, and the Liberal candidate, Alyssa Briley, actually, who we've had on the podcast, sadly, well, no, I'm saying sadly for her as someone that I've known for a while. I'm not passing any comment on that election. Was lost very badly, as the Liberals lost very badly right across the country. Same at this election. That driving around Burlington, in most places, not quite as overwhelmingly as I remember that election, but in most places it's pretty clear the Conservatives had more signs. There's a good number of PPC signs as well. But I think all that really tells you is how angry the angry people are, right? There's a lot of people who might have been, yeah, I'm going to vote Liberal. I'm not sticking a sign on my lawn this time, just leave me alone and I'll vote for you on election day. There's a hell of a lot of Conservatives who are like, yeah, give me the sign, give me the big one, and by the way, put another one on the other side of the lawn. That's kind of the mentality that seems to be going on. But I mean, and that's just so tragic that we have this divide, that it's really just loathing on one side and apathy on the other. I know. When I say, I mean, I think I would say, I mean, just not having watched Karina Gould's career at various points, I mean, I think she's now kind of established herself, now having been a minister and things, as one of those candidates who can almost, up to a point, withstand whatever is happening to the party. They have some personal loyalty. They're well liked as a human being in their riding. There are candidates in all parties who can do that. I'm thinking of what was his name? The old Liberal MPP from down Niagara way, who was there for 40 years.
Peter Tabuns.
No, it's not him. Bob. What's his name? Is it Bob something? He lost at the last election in 2018. It was he's now the mayor. I can't believe I can't remember his name. Anyway, it'll come to me. But yeah, you get those people, and I think there's a little bit of that going on with Karina Gould now. However, the candidate the Conservatives chose, at a first glance, I have to say, I thought was far more credible than many candidates that have run for the Conservatives in Burlington in recent years. Someone who teaches at Sheridan College, who has quite a impressive resume, but then you hear about the gun rights stuff, and quotes saying, I am the gun lobby. I think is the quote. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but that's something very like that. Possibly not vaccinated, not answering questions not answering any questions from anybody, not speaking to people. It's like, well, come on, this is just insulting people. If you really want us to switch party, you got to give us a better reason than that.
Yeah, I just want to chime in a bit on my take on here in Burlington, and then I see Justin posted a comment we're going to get to. I thought I was surprised at the behavior of the conservatives here in Burlington. Truth be told, um, I've lived here most of my life. I've sat through a ton of elections here, and yeah, it gets rhetoric gets heated, and you go back and forth. But um, this how quickly her signs just popped up in our around town. I thought that was I was like, oh my gosh, there's a real appetite for change here. Um, but the attitude toward, like, if you went on social media and looked at the comments posted on both Karina and Emily Brown's respective Facebook pages, it was just really kind of visceral, nasty stuff. Also, there was a moment when I was out with my wife this past weekend. We were downtown for a just an evening stroll, and the conservatives were driving around in a trailer with Emily Brown signs posted on it. Nothing wrong with that, but they had signs that made up that were basically blasting the liberals were going to tax your home, which was something that w- there's nothing backing up that claim. Um,
There was two
and
lines
and I,
that they dropped
and I
into the platform that was just flying
and
a
I
kite. Yeah.
and I just thought that's something I've never seen before in this town. I thought that was a really low move. So there's that. Going to Justin's comment, recognizing vote share percentages doesn't translate exactly to seats. How much did the PPC split the vote? Did they cost the conservatives the election? Um, I might have been wrong on that one. I'm looking at the seats right now across the country. They're polling about 4.8% of of the electoral vote, or the vote share. I'm not sure necessarily. Like, we're looking here in the 905. I don't see where the People's Party really cost the conservatives any seats or any support. Um,
I think if they're having an effect, it may be elsewhere. I mean, we're looking at an area where the Liberals were expected to be strong. The Liberals are proving to be strong. Um, okay, I'm just seeing CBC are projecting that Maxime Bernier has lost in his riding. Good. I'm not going to be unbiased about that one. Good. He lost. Good riddance. Hope he buggers off. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, it's going to be in those super close ridings where the Conservatives are at risk that it can make all the difference. And I think it will take. I heard somewhere on television that someone calculated last time that the PPC maybe cost the Conservatives 7 seats, even with the percentages they got then. So they're going to get, even if it's only 4%, a much higher share of the vote this time. So if that's 7, that could be, 15,
well,
20
yeah,
seats.
Kyle just pointed out Bernier is in fourth in his home riding. That kind of goes in keeping. I'm not from Quebec. I have no idea what the lay of the land is in Quebec per se, but um, the my understanding is Bose, which is his riding, they don't buy into this, nativist rhetoric. It's very much kind of a, help your neighbor. We're all in this to help each other out kind of attitude, from what I've read and what I've seen reported on the riding from Quebec media. So his Bernie's rhetoric isn't really like he's. I think it's very clear, like the PPC now are as a party that's just woefully out of touch with the majority of Canadians. Um, the fear that they were going to split the conservative vote, I don't think has materialized.
I
So
mean,
I, I,
I don't
I
think
was wrong on that one.
it's not a split. I mean, I think in a closer election, well, no, I think it would be a much closer election. If we're talking about swings of -5 seats, Liberal right now, Liberals are projected to lose 5, Conservatives up 4. It could make the difference between a strong a strong minority for the Liberals and a weak minority, or it could make the difference between a conservative minority and a Liberal one. It's when you're talking about tens of seats making big differences. Yeah, it could have an effect, but I'm not seeing it in the 905. It doesn't entirely surprise me because I just didn't see where the losses for the Liberals were going to come from.
Yeah, I mean, I think it. Yeah, I think it's safe to say we're going to have a liberal government. I think it's going to be a minority uh, uh, from what I'm seeing here. The I'll be honest. I'm going to say that the winners are the liberals just on paper, but in reality, every political party here um, is a loser. I mean, the Liberals have lost seats. They're going back to Ottawa with a weaker uh, uh, mandate now. They've lost seats. The Conservatives needed to win government. They didn't. I think O'Toole is going. If he's smart, he's going to. He's going to find a way to just walk gracefully away and not have to deal with that. The New Democrats, yeah, they might have won some seats, but maybe Singh has technically won because he gets to keep his job as leader for the foreseeable future.
Well, the NDP seem to be very reluctant to change leaders unless they really have to, which
Or
I
unless your name's
sometimes think
Mulcair.
is, yeah, oddly enough, unless you're the guy who, yeah.
The interesting thing is the Green Party. I thought the Green Party would be decimated in this election, but they have not. The message here is I think what the Canadians are sending is this: they like the way the government was working before. It was, you know, they're sending a message they want to punish Trudeau for calling the election, so some of his they'll take away some of his seats. But for the most part, I think they wanted us to. They were happy with the way it was going.
Well, right now, I mean, if we're completely honest, right now, I'm just looking at the early results from the West as well now. If we're completely honest, this is the election that it's the biggest waste of time in history.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, how many seats have changed hands? Can't be many. How many are projected to change hands? Not many. It's really it's an awful lot of. I mean, the one good thing about our elections is they're over quickly. It's not like the U.S. system where it's
Right.
like a 3 3/4 year proposition. But I'm just trying to actually get a list of seats that have or are projected to have changed hands, and none of the TV stations are really helping me with that. If anybody knows where there's a list of the ones that are actually switching rather than just who's winning what, that would be useful.
I mean, right now it looks exactly the map. Pretty much, I think looks exactly how it did in 2019. Nothing has changed. The Liberals are completely locked out of the West again. Alberta and Saskatchewan are going very much conservative, which I like to. I look at it and say that's to their detriment. They want to be anti-liberal. Well, here's the thing: the Liberal government, it's going to be a Liberal government, and they don't have anyone at the table. That's what it comes down to. Is they don't have anyone at the table.
Well, don't get me started. If you look at the vote share in Alberta, it's not 100% conservative out there. It's strongly conservative for sure, but it's ridiculous that our electoral system works the way it does to give vastly too many seats to the Conservatives out there, vastly too many seats to the Liberals out east. If you want to take that approach, neither extreme is right. quite honestly, for the people who cast their votes. I mean, if you lived in Alberta and you're not a conservative, what a depressing experience every election must be for you.
Let's think like that's the thing. If you're the message has got to be to the conservatives is um, get out of Alberta and Saskatchewan. That like you just take it for granted. They're going to always support you. Um, you got to get back into the 905 region and start talking to people here and talk to them. Don't just be, hey, let me go have a rant fest and tell me why you're pissed off with Trudeau. You actually have to talk to say, well, yeah, you're, because there's a lot of people um who are ticked off at Trudeau here in the 905, but they want more than just I need to park my angry vote with the conservatives. You give them a reason to vote for you, and they will.
What do we think about the Liberals from here? I mean, if we accept that they've won, do they have any right to feel smug right now?
No, they don't have a leg to stand on to be smug at all. The message is in my view, it's clearly put to them. Canada is pissed off with them for calling this election. The idea, in our mind, Parliament was working. You were handling the COVID-19 pandemic just fine. You had the House was in order. Yeah, the rest of Canada doesn't give a crap about Pierre Poilievre or Michelle Rumpel tutting around and trying to stir. Like nobody cares about what's going on in Ottawa. As long as you kept us safe, you got the vaccines in our arms, and you got money at the door. That was all that mattered to people. They didn't care about the rest of it. Because they don't have a lot of, I don't think they have a lot of expectations of Justin Trudeau to deliver on these huge events anymore. He could show that he can't do that. And so yeah, I don't think there's any room to be smug. This isn't a time to glee, and it's definitely not a time to say, hey, we're gonna throw our hat in the air and say what a great job we're doing, or the Canadians have utter faith in you. They don't. I think they just have, well, yeah, but the other guys were even worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to be completely honest here that the overwhelming kind of attitude to the Liberals is disappointment, right? I think there was huge hope in 2015. It wasn't that long ago, and it's not. It's really not. And I think it's more than just that the governments get old, right? Everybody gets tired of them. It's like we expected more. We expected more than this, and ultimately, does that matter if you're kind of trying to win elections on the safe pair of hands thing? That we won't screw up anything too badly. Better the devil you know, that kind of thing. But I feel like Justin Trudeau was expected to be a more kind of generational leader than this. He won one majority, blew it the second time around. He's not going to get it back the third time around. He's, if he's going to be the kind of change element that he kind of promised to be, he would be looking at what can we do with the NTP maybe to break through the kind of impasses so that we can do more with legislation. It drives me nuts that there's no willingness to talk across party lines to get things done. That's how we have a health service in this country, a national health service.
What I'm floored at is, would I be, if I was a Liberal, Just I want to point out here. We're reporting apparently Hamilton Center. Matthew Green of the NDP is elected the MP there, so that's news. Um, the Yeah, I mean, if I was Justin Trudeau right now, I'd be looking at you now have we're coming off the tail end of this pandemic. Um, I'd be looking at starting to form some kind of massive legacy project, and then I'd be looking at a way out the door in 2 or 3 years. Truth be told, because here's what I'm predicting is going to happen in the next term. The Conservatives, Aaron O'Toole is going to be fighting for his life for the conservatives. You're going to see, Pierre Poilievre come out and or whomever just come out and start the death of 1,000 knives at the conservatives. Like if I was Aaron O'Toole, I'd just be looking out for my back at every caucus meeting. I think he'll be done, which means that the conservatives will go into full on mode. Now, will the PPC mean anything? Probably not, but I don't think Bernier is going to go away. I think he'll be there. The problem is the conservatives have an anger management issue, and they need to solve that. They need to figure that out, because if they're just going to be the party of angry white people, there's no solution to that. They'll just feed into the People Party propaganda, and they'll just feed that, and they'll this we're not going to get any growth of the party. If I was Justin Trudeau, I'd use that as a cover to push forward my legacy project, my big things that I want people to remember me for, and then walk away. Go talk to Jagmeet Singh, and yeah, I'd say we need to push this through and take credit for it, and then walk away. Because are you going to risk losing in the next general election to whomever? So,
I mean, and you're there to govern, not win elections. That's if the first thing you're thinking about the day after you win a minority mandate is, we're not going to do a deal with those guys because that might have a negative effect next time we have an election, then that's kind of despicable, as it is. I mean, if you look around the world, a recent example, the Liberal Democrats in Britain formed a coalition with the Conservatives. It absolutely destroyed the Liberal Democrats. They have not recovered from having done that deal with the devil. So it's not necessarily something that does your opponents any favors. It can do quite the opposite. But people are wanting to see politics done a different way. I mean, people keep on saying this. Politicians keep on saying it. It's time to actually put that into action. Rerunning the same thing over and over again. Just referring back to something I said earlier, Scott Duval was the MP in Hamilton Mountain who is not running again, and his more time with his family was the reason he stood down. It looks like that seat will be going to the Liberals in what is a significant win for them, I'd say.
Interesting note. Mariam Monsef is defeated. She will not be. Peterborough Kawartha is going to the Conservatives, which I can't say is a big. I'm not necessarily surprised. I didn't think she was a fantastic.
The Conservatives certainly were gunning for her every step of the way. Yeah, less said the better, maybe.
I'll say this: I would say this election was the most useless election I can imagine. Like I don't see any as these writings become solid. I'm not seeing any major upsets. I'm not seeing a major a message. I'm seeing that people want to send a message that, you know, Justin Trudeau, you should not have called an election. We're not happy with you. But at the same time, they conservatives need to work on their people skills. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I mean, really, I think you're absolutely spot on. Um, just to fill people in on ridings in the 905 that have been actually called. Markham Thornhill, Liberal, by a long way. Humber River Black Creek, no surprise, Liberal. Etobicoke North Liberal, Brampton East Liberal. They're all Liberal. Brampton North Liberal, Brampton West Liberal. So no breakthrough anywhere for the Conservatives. Mississauga Centre Liberal. Milton's just been called.
Milton just got called for Adam Van Koeverden.
Yeah, and he's looking at 50% of the vote. So I mean, a very solid win there. Nadim Akbar not able to do any better than Lisa Raitt was able to do last time. And the NDP, you know, the NDP really have to be disappointed that they are just not making any headway in the 905, because you got to, you know, if you're really talking about being a contender for government, you got to win in the 905, and you got to be closer than, I mean, that they're in third place with, you know, in the ridings they're looking at 10-11%.
What gets me is that, like, Jagmeet Singh, he was a Brampton MPP long before he threw his hat in the federal ring. I was wondering why he should be running in the 905. He should be running in his old seat in Brampton, where he grew up, and make a, you know, use that to kind of bolster his caucus in that region, because there is a lot of NDP support in those areas.
You really do wonder if he didn't do himself any favors by going for a seat out west. I mean, I know there was logic to that, and it was an available seat to run in, you know, but yeah, you wonder if he'd stayed in the 905 and kind of worn that as a badge of, you know, I'm Jagmeet Singh, I'm a 905er, I'm, you know, kind of make Brampton, the whole of Brampton, your own. I mean, my goodness, you know, that you kind of feel like that could have been a thing, you know.
Yeah. You know, like he could have. I think he really could have taken away Peel region from a good chunk of it from the Liberals and given it to brought it back to the NDP. I'm looking at Hamilton Centre as that low stronghold of the NDP in Hamilton, because that's kind of typical. Like Hamilton East going Liberal, not surprised there. The fact that the Liberals took, or the NDP took, the Liberals took away the Hamilton Mountain from the NDP is quite surprising.
That's a big blow. I mean, I really think that the NDP, and quite rightly so in a lot of ways, kind of view Hamilton as theirs. You know, like this is our city, and you know, I'm not having a go at them at all about that. I mean, it's like they've won it fair and square. They have made it Fortress NDP. So to lose Hamilton Mountain is a big deal. To not make, looks like they're not going to take, the NDP are not going to take Stony Creek, and that Chad Collins will take it. That will be very disappointing for them too. You know, a lot of people felt that Chad Collins was kind of pretty compromised by some of his associations on Hamilton Council. However, I mean, politics is very local in Hamilton. What Hamilton Centre thinks is an obvious choice is not an obvious choice in Hamilton East Stony Creek. So
What I'm going to be curious about is what happens with Hamilton LRT now.
Well, I mean,
I, like
I feel
I
like it should be game over if the liberal if the with the federal Liberals winning. I can't believe that. I do not know. So the Liberal presumptive winner in Hamilton Mountain is Lisa Hefner. I
yeah
don't know her position on LRT. I do know that Chad Collins was opposed to it, and so was Vito Scro, and that was kind of there were a lot of eyebrows raised, to say the least, when the Liberals ran two candidates almost weeks after announcing this huge investment in Hamilton and LRT. That they're running guys who are viscerally opposed to LRT. I don't think backbench MPs don't have much of a say. I don't think the fact that, say, Chad Collins is going to pick up a seat by the look of it changes anything. But I still think it's strange that the Liberals ran those guys again. Yeah.
yeah. I'm just going through the 905 here, and I'm seeing yeah. Yeah, I mean, what I'm kind of struck by here is, yeah, the people's. I guess it was one of those things like the. I thought the People's Party was going to be more of a factor in this election. I really thought they were going to be this kind of death knell for some conservative ridings. It's clearly I overestimated their importance in the political scheme of things. After this, I don't see how anyone could take them seriously as a political entity.
It's interesting though, because I mean, so let's look at picking at random Kitchener-Conestoga. Actually, no, let's not pick them. That's a bad choice. Let's pick somewhere where the Conservatives do well, but not that well. Well, 6%. So I mean, like Vito Scro and Dan Moyes in Flamborough Glanbrook. They're about 6% apart, and the People's Party take about 6% of the vote. Now, the way that plans out, that plays into that doesn't affect anything because the Conservatives will be leading enough. But in a closer election, that could tip the balance. I mean, 6%. It's not nothing, but it's only going to have an effect in those ridings where things are really close. Just trying to find some more kind of marginal seats. Well, so here's one actually, Hamilton Mountain. So Al Miles, 24% of the vote, 4,000 votes so far. Give him the 1,090 votes that the PPC have, and he's almost winning that riding. No, he's not. He's not almost winning. He's a hell of a lot closer. He's ahead of the NDP, in fact.
If you look down at St. Catharines, Chris Biddle, who's a Liberal incumbent, is leading, only with 36% of the vote. Christina Waller, who is Chris Biddle has 5,380 votes. Christina Waller has 4,561 votes. But then if you look down at the People's Party candidate, Rebecca Hahn, she has 963 votes. That would be enough to...
Yeah, I'm just looking at Niagara Centre. So you were looking at which one?
St. Catharines.
St. Catharines, yeah. So the neighbouring riding, Niagara Centre, same thing. People's Party votes would easily put the Conservatives ahead. And right now, the Vance Badaway is ahead with 33 to 30%. So, yeah, that that's significant, you know. Yeah, I mean they are the PPC down in Niagara. They're at
If
like
you
9-10%.
here's something though. Hamilton East Stony Creek. Chad Collins is in the lead with 2,887 votes. Ned Kuruk, who is the conservative candidate, is following close behind by 2,521 votes. If Mario Ricci of the People's Party gave him the 672 votes he needed to win, Ned Kuruk would be in the lead.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's clear to me that there are, and that would have been a huge win for the Conservatives to win that seat, because that always goes between Liberal and NDP.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to being kind of a bad night for the NDP in Hamilton. Surprisingly bad night, with their guy currently, Nick Milanovic, currently sitting in third place. It's very close between all three. So don't get me wrong, but 8%. I mean, again, it was just an urban riding. 8% of the vote going to vaccine denying fruitcakes. I don't know. Can I put it any more diplomatic than that? No. It's worrying.
Yep. It's yeah. Yeah. I think it's clear to say that we're going to have another Liberal government. It's. I think, yeah. If you're a progressive, you have to be happy though, because right now you have a Liberal government that's going to have, with the New Democrats, kind of holding the balance of power. Right now, like Jagmeet Singh probably has to be pretty happy with himself, honestly. Now that I think about it, he's got it. He'll have the balance of power in a minority government.
Actually, there's one thing we should throw into the mix, and that could be potentially a huge thing. I read the other day. So right now, no mail-in ballots will have been counted. Those mail-in ballots cannot be counted until all the regular ballots have been counted.
Right.
So TV stations are calling it. Polls were suggesting that Conservatives were doing much better in the mail-in ballots. If that were proved to be correct, everything we're saying tonight could be wrong.
Yeah, but the question is, how many are there sitting in there? Like, and it's not like a general vote there. You have to go into each riding. How many votes are there out there that are going to swing a few ridings? Now the CBC just posted here they're projecting a Liberal minority government.
Looks that
which
way,
that's what I think is going to happen. We're going to have another Liberal minority government.
I mean, so Liberals leading in 155. What did they have last time around? Someone remind me.
160 something.
It looks like they're going to be around 100. I mean, this could be just the mirror. I mean, it could be the same parliament.
Well,
it's the biggest waste of time in history.
So according to Gaines, they would have had 157 seats last time, because right now they're projecting to lose 2 seats. So yeah, I mean, like this is so. We look like we're going right back to where we were a month ago. This looks to be a complete waste of all of our time. The stress, the stress and the nastiness that we all had to go through is just yeah. I'll be honest. I'm glad that it's over, because we can get back to dealing with the pandemic, getting the nation back to work. And put this month behind us.
And I think there should be some serious questions made. I mean, I'm sure the opposition will complain. I mean, and it's really, what's the point? What's done is done.
Right.
But it was a foolish election. It was a waste of time, and it will have achieved absolutely nothing. That's pretty bad
Yeah.
politics, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you can't say, "Well done, Trudeau, you really nailed it." You may have hastened the arrival of a better opponent, and when I say a better opponent, I mean a more effective opponent in possibly Pierre Poilievre. I don't know. It doesn't, you know. You can never rule out that your current wounded opponent, who you think you can win a majority from, is actually your best friend. And you want to keep that guy sticking around for a while.
I'm thinking. I think although I think Justin Trudeau probably has a good chance for the next little bit to, I say, govern like a majority. The conservatives are going to be foaming at the mouth to get Aaron O'Toole out. I don't think there's a viable option to replace him. The PPC is. There might be a few ridings that they could have helped. They might have helped him to tie in a few ridings, maybe like once we go into really dive in. But in terms of a political force, no, they are. The PPC is dead. We need to just stop giving them air.
Yeah, I mean, just call out to some friends of the show, actually. Joey Coleman saying PPC picking up 6 to 8% across Hamilton ridings. How much effect that's had, who knows? But it's Shannon Gillies, another former guest, asking who's the next Conservative leader going to be, and saying let's hope they don't look at votes lost to the PPC and conclude they need to lean into the crazy. If they were smart, and there hasn't been much evidence of that lately, they'd finally realise Michael Chong MP would be their best choice. I'm just I'm seeing people kind of echoing what we've just been saying about kind of what a waste of time. Can you call this a win? There's Gerald Butts, who's obviously I don't know what his current status is, but obviously was instrumental in the 2015 victory. Liberals win. Congrats to the team on the toughest of campaigns. And still Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It's like, I don't think... I would be kind of embarrassed if I was someone who had advocated for this election tonight.
I would not be hanging my head high tonight. This is clearly a time when every political party misread the electorate. Like they are. To me, it's an evidence that they are out of touch with what the people are worried about. Kyle just posted on their social. The social conservatives and far right will come for blood. They're restless after a lot of years of giving support to leaders who don't truly allow them to go after their issues. I'm going to agree with Kyle on that one, although I think it's going to be a pointless argument because or a pointless cause for the conservatives to worry about that. I think that's the problem, is that the conservatives have been looking inwards for far too long. They need to step outside of Alberta and Saskatchewan and talk to the rest of Canada and find out what their concerns are. The rest of the social conservative issues aren't game winners. We've had 2 elections where they have not been game changers. They haven't won any seats for the conservatives. They haven't moved the dial anywhere. It's a dead issue. Gun control, abortion is a dead issue in this country in terms of gaining support. You only fire up a base that is becoming increasingly marginal and inconsequential to winning you government. You got to break out of your bubble, go talk to Canadians, hear what they have to say. The majority of Canadians are very progressive. Clearly, like what the conservatives have 34 34% of the vote. So a third of the country supports them. The rest, that means 2/3 are fairly progressive. 2/3 really don't care about Alberta oil. They
Yep.
don't care. The 2/3 believe climate change is the biggest issue that we're facing. They want it. They want to see a very concrete plan to address it. 80% of us have vaccines in our arms, and we're not afraid to share. We're in favor of vaccine passports. We want to get back to work and back to socializing. And quite frankly, we don't care what the rock throwing PPC troglodytes have to say about it. The Conservatives need to get out of their bubble and start talking to actual Canadians and realize that a lot of us are far more left from them. I'm not going to say that everybody's a downright progressive, but the issues that they want to fight on are not game winners. They have to go back to square one. The sad thing is I don't see anyone in that caucus who is going to fight to bring the Conservatives back to the center. It's going to be a fight to who's going to be angrier and meaner and dirtier, and that's going to be
Well, you know what?
that's going to be their undoing.
I'm going to say something strange, in that I'm going to call. Oh, and her name's gone out of my head. The person who I'm guessing is the new MP for Thornhill. What's her name?
Melissa Lantsman.
Melissa Lantsman, who is the sole Conservative in Canada who did actually speak to us, and whose campaign manager was very polite and tried to be helpful, and then was either instructed or chose to go back on that, and that's fine. I'm going to say you win the gold prize of Conservatives for actually speaking to us and trying to work something out, and perhaps that is the kind of person coming into Parliament for the first time who maybe can pull the Conservatives in a more sane direction. And you know, it probably ain't ever going to be my party, but in fact, I'm pretty sure it never will be. But I do think there's this need for all the parties to be reflecting what the majority of Canadians want. You got to win you got to run in the election you're in. So you got to run on the issues that actually people give a damn about, and you've got to be putting forward the policies that people want. And if you can't keep on going back and running elections on the same things and losing again and running again on the same policies and losing again and losing again. They've got to give up that stuff. Move on. You ain't ever going to win with that stuff. Start talking about things like fiscal responsibility and those old school
a green economy.
Yeah, and you can do that from a Conservative perspective.
Absolutely,
and that's fine. There's all kinds of, again, I might never be a huge fan, but there's all kinds of things you can do I tell you, I could run the stupid party so much better. I'm joking, people. Yeah. Anyway, we're coming up on 11:30. We could talk all night, but I mean, I'm really not sure that we would be contributing much to the world. This is for the next 30 hours, the next 3 or 4 days. I suspect it'll be more of the same before every vote is finally counted. I will just throw out there that mail-in ballot question, because there's a lot of ballots that are just not being looked at right now. And it seems to be that every media organization has completely forgotten about that. So I just want to be smug if it turns out that that's a factor. However, if it's not a factor, we'll forget about it. But maybe we should wrap it up, Joel. And do you have any final thoughts before we?
I'm just gonna say, thank God it's over, and we can. We can start working on. We can go back to what we were doing a month ago, and worry about that, because Lord knows that's what I think people want. Yeah, I'm not seeing a big appetite for change from the people here, and I'm hoping that I'm hoping that the parties start listening to people more. Uh, that's my hope is what's going to happen.
My big hope in the minute we're going to give ourselves arbitrarily, is that having tried a 2 year minority, the Liberals now think seriously about trying to make a minority work for 4 years, and how they could do about what they could do to do that. And that's going to mean talking to other parties. It's going to mean talking to the NDP, let's face it. And electoral reform has been on the agenda of both parties. Justin Trudeau somewhat unbelievably brought up electoral reform the other day. He clearly has a preference. He needs to take that preference out of it. I will say that the NDP's proposal on electoral reform is excellent, which is to hand it over to a people's a people's commission, or whatever you want to call it. Let them decide, hold the election under new rules, and then have a referendum afterwards to see if you want to keep it. I think that's a solid way of approaching that whole issue. And if working on that issue, you could give us a 4-year government rather than another year and a half, 2 years, and then doing this all over again, I think a lot of Canadians would really appreciate that, and that would be a significant change for the better in the way our politics works if that were to happen, even if it's just a matter of, on that one issue, reaching across the aisle and saying, can we work something out? Whether it happens, we shall see.
All right. Well, hopefully we won't be doing this for in a few months when we do come back here for the province.
The province that'll be interesting. Yeah, I have no idea.
All right, folks.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for everybody who tuned in. I hope you enjoyed it. We enjoyed it. We'll be doing it again next year for sure. Thanks, everybody, and bye for now.